Naruto, The Blue-Eyed Uchiha Chapter 1. The Birth of a Legend. The night was that of a Friday. I know that doesn't matter in a ninja village, but this night was special as, hurry up and get this baby out of me. Somebody was giving birth. And yet, at the same time, it was a day of destruction as a demon was attacking the village. Except this wasn't just some weak run-of-the-mill type of demon. No, this was the Kyuubi no Kitsune, the strongest demon known to man. Why was it attacking the village? That is a question no one knew, and they weren't going to ask it as it was killing every ninja that was in its range. But with tails that, with a single swing, can cause earthquakes, tsunamis, and many other natural occurring disasters, everything was in its range. In the hospital, Namikaze Uzumaki Kushina was not what you would call a patient person. She was yelling to the doctor to hurry up and deliver her baby. "Come on, keep pushing, I can see the head." The doctor spoke as she helped Kushina give birth. Her husband, Namikaze Minato, was right by her side encouraging her and having his hand squeezed. "Come on, honey, breathe, breathe, ahhh." He yelled as his wife squeezed his hand a little too hard. The doctor had most of the infant out. "All right, give me one last big push." "Ah, congratulations, Namikaze-sama, it's a handsome and healthy baby boy," she said as she let Minato cut the cord and clean the baby off before handing the baby to the tired mother. Kushina smiled down to her newborn child. "Hello, little one. I'm your Ka-san. Welcome to life," she said softly as the infant began to cry, before she started to rock it gently to calmness. "Minato-kun, what should we name him?" she asked her husband, knocking him out of his stupor of finally becoming a father. Minato wrapped his arms around his wife and kid as he made a shadow clone to take their first picture as a family. "We'll name him Naruto, Namikaze Uzumaki Naruto," he said, but unfortunately the moment was interrupted when an Anbu came in. The Anbu bowed as he spoke through his dragon mask. "Hokage-sama, the Kyuubi is nearly at the village, you have to help us," the Anbu begged as the yondaime dismissed him with a wave of his hand. Minato then turned to his wife who had tears in her eyes. "It's time, isn't it?" she said under her breath, as she continued to rock her child. "Can I just have a little more time with him?" she asked this time, kissing her son all over his face. She kissed his head again as he opened his eyes and she seen his freshly blue-gray eyes. She smiled down at him as her own emerald-like eyes bled into red as her Sharingan came to life, to help memorize her son's smiling baby face. You have to understand her history first. Her grandmother on her mother's side of the family was an Uchiha, and her grandfather on her father's side of the family was a Senju, but not just any Senju, this one was Hashirama himself. She herself married a Namikaze and she's an Uzumaki, so her child was literally going to be the strongest ninja in history, maybe even exceeding the Rikudo Sannin. With the Uchiha's bloodline, the Uzumaki's longevity and large chakra reserves, the Namikaze's stamina and amazing techniques, and the Senju's military intelligence, analytical minds, and their uncanny ability to be Kage level, then it's no question just how strong Naruto will become. She could tell that she didn't have much time, since she had lost a large amount of blood, and no amount of blood pills would bring it back. Her fully matured Sharingan eyes morphed into that of a four-pointed star, Tsukiyomi. She whispered as she sent her son into a 3-day-long Genjutsu that only lasted a single second in real life. What she did in the 3-day span will most likely be known later in his life when the memory of the event is systematically unlocked later in his life. What was weird though was that her chakra levels seriously plummeted, the machine monitoring it was going crazy at the sudden drop. Minato had seen what his wife did, but like always he didn't have time to panic as she was done a second later. But who said he didn't panic as he watched the machine go crazy a second later as his wife's chakra levels dropped down from 85% to 25%. "Oh shit," he muttered as he quick stepped to her bedside and popped a soldier pill in her mouth, and her chakra levels rose to 35%. But he didn't see that, all he seen was her Sharingan fade from view. He wasn't the yondaime for nothing as he noticed a slight flux of energy enter Naruto before disappearing altogether. "Ooh, I understand now," he thought as Kushina gave him one final kiss to Naruto's head and gave him to her husband, saying in a very low and raspy voice, "Go save the village." She said that with tears in her eyes, as they shared one final kiss knowing they weren't going to see each other in this life. Just when he stopped the kiss and left, The nurse finally entered to check on Kushina after hearing the chakra machine. Kushina gave last thought as she felt her life slip out of her body. Take that, Kyubi. It's time for you to enter yet another Uzumaki, and after this one you'll never experience freedom ever again. She thought as she fully passed, with a smirk on her face. On the battlefield, the ninja of the village were still doing battle with the Kyubi when the Yondaime appeared on top of the Toad boss summon, Gamabunta, the chief toad. The Yondaime is here, we're saved. A random jounin yelled. Another giant toad appeared. On top of this one was Jiraiya and the Sandaime, this toad was Gamaken. And Jiraiya were even more saved. The same jounin yelled again. And though reinforcements had arrived, the Kyubi was still doing damage to the village, and he even wounded Gamabunta in his left eye. That was seconds before the retreating shinobi witnessed a bright flash of light, and when the battlefield became clear again, they only seen Gamaken, with the Sandaime and Jiraiya on his head. No Minato, Gamabunta, or even Kyubi. It took a second for them to realize that the Kyubi had been defeated. They expressed their immense joy at the defeat of the great Kyubi no Kitsune. And it was all thanks to the Yondaime, and speaking of the Yondaime, hey, where's the Yondaime? A jounin asked the question that made many shut up and think about it. They now knew that the Yondaime gave up his life to get rid of the great demon fox. They took about a second to mourn the loss of their Yondaime before they renewed their cheering of their victory over that of the Kyubi. Closer to the disappearance of the Kyubi was Jiraiya and Hiruzen, and they were searching for the body of Minato. Even after a thorough search for the body, they still couldn't find it. Even after a flux of churka filled the air minutes ago, they just couldn't pinpoint the location it came from, with all the leftover Yuki in the air. They were beginning to give up on the search, until they heard the sound of crying inside of one of Kyubi's larger and deeper footprints, at least a dozen feet deep. We found them. An Anbu yelled to his leader. Soon Jiraiya and Hiruzen, and a squad of Anbu were at the site. The Sandaime and his student jumped into the crater and walked to the blonde pair. Minato was pale like his soul was recently taken from him, and little Naruto was still crying. Nobody knew what was happening to him. But the Sandaime took a closer look as he bent down to pick him up. What he seen nearly made him faint. In the child's eyes was a fully matured Sharingan, and the kamas were spinning crazily before vanishing from view, returning the infant's eyes to their original blue-gray. This truly was the birth of a legend. Naruto, the Blue-Eyed Uchiha Chapter 2, Decisions. The Sandaime, Jiraiya, and the Anbu were jumping towards the hospital to return the child to his mother, when a toad appeared in a puff of smoke on Jiraiya's shoulder and whispered in his ear. He stopped and listened to Toad. This made the others stop as well. "What is it, Jiraiya-kun?" the Sandaime asked his only remaining student, as he carefully held the infant in his arms. Jiraiya's eyes were getting wider and wider the more the toad said. The toad disappeared as his missions was successful. Jiraiya handed over the body of his student to the nearest Anbu, after saying a quick prayer for his lost pupil. "Sensei, Gamasui just informed me of Orochimaru's last whereabouts. I have to go and check it out. He also told me that he recently joined an organization of some sorts, and I need to check what kind of organization. I'll be back whenever I have the time to, he said as his body flickered away. The Sandaime's eyes narrowed after hearing about his once favorite student. He knew he should have just killed him, a couple of months ago, for his treasonous acts, but he just couldn't find it in him to commit to the deed. He sighed as they finally reached the hospital to return the baby to his mother and to tell her the grim news about her husband. He looked at the only Anbu that remained at his side. The others had went to take the Yondaime's body to the morgue. This Anbu wore an Inu mask, and behind that you would see the face of a battle-hardened 15-year-old. The third shinobi war was truly devastating to all. Atop of his head you could see silver hair that seemed to defy gravity as it stood up, diagonally, in the air. He wore the standard armor required for Anbu, and carried the standard ninjutsu that Anbu carried as their weapons. They would have walked into the lobby of the hospital if the head doctor wasn't there to stop them. "What is it you want, Nico? Sunlight?" asked the Sandaime. Nico, the head doctor, bowed. "I'm sorry to disturb you, Hokage-sama, but I must tell you that Uzumaki Kushina has passed away a half hour ago," she said, bowing again, this one lower than the last. Both the Sandaime and Inu's eyes widened. Kushina was dead. No, it couldn't be. They blasted past the doctor and into the building, but halfway to the room they seen her being carried in a body bag. As the body passed, Naruto woke up and began to cry, reminding them that they still had him. I guess that he somehow could sense the death of his mother, just like he had with his father. What are you going to do with the child now, Hokage-sama? Inu asked his leader, who was trying to calm the child down, but it was to no avail. The Sandaime gave him a long and heavy sigh as he started walking out the hospital. I don't know. I have to get the council together for a decision of the boy's future. 2 hours later, the Sandaime gathered the council to the meeting. He only wanted the Shinobi Council, but he had to call in the Civilian Council to talk about the reconstruction process. After talking about all of that, Shimura Danzu spoke up. So are you going to finalize your decision on being reinstated for the seat of Kage? Because if not, I think that I'll do a great job on being the Godame of Konoha, he said after a moment of thinking. The others were nodding their head at the first question. Only the civies and the other elders were nodding their heads at the second statement. The Sandaime looked at the bandaged man. Yes, I reinstate myself as the Hokage, he said, causing Danzu to frown. Now I have something more important to tell you. You know when I said earlier that the Kyuubi had been killed by my predecessor? Well, that wasn't entirely true. The Kyuubi was in fact defeated, but it was not killed, he said with a straight, serious face. What is it you have to say, Hokage-sama? Hyuga Hayashi asked. This man was the leader of his clan just like the other members of the Shinobi Council. He was considered a genius in the uses of his clan's Dojutsu, the Byakugan. He was 34 years old and stood at 5 feet, 7 inches. He had pale skin and the white eyes associated with his clan. Yes, what is it you have to tell us that was so important that it wasn't the first thing to talk about? Asked Uchiha Fugaku with a tone that told everyone he was irritated that the meeting had to continue. He was the leader of his own clan and also the leader of the village's police force, so we all could understand why he was acting this way. He was 35 years old and was 5 feet 3 inches. He had lightly tanned skin and black eyes that would turn red and show his clan's Dojutsu, the Sharingan. He also had a 3-year-old son he named Itachi, who was already showing that he had skills in the ninja arts. The Sandaime lightly glared at the two. Well, I would have told you if you hadn't interrupted me. Now, like I was saying, the Kyuubi wasn't killed, but it was sealed into a newborn baby. As he said that, Kakashi entered the room with Naruto in his arms. It took a moment for the information to register in their minds, before some of the room's occupants started yelling for the death of the baby Kyuubi. Haruno Tsukumi's banshee-like voice far surpassed that of the others as she yelled, Hokage-sama, I beg of you. You must kill that demon. It killed my entire clan. He voice screeched, loudly shutting everyone up, and also making Inuzuka Tsume and her ninja dog cover their ears. But everybody didn't really care about the pink-haired family of banshees. Every person in that Kami-forsaken clan was just as loud as she was, even the old people. One person spoke up. I mean, no disrespect, Tsukumi, but who the fuck cares? Mitokado Hamura asked, shocking everyone at the explicitity, as they all looked at him. What? He asked again. He was part of the Elder Council with Danzu and his old teammate Udatane Koharu. Before the Sandaime could talk, laughter was heard in the room. It was loud and boisterous. It was coming from a woman. She had wild and spiky brown hair, red fang marks going down each of her cheeks and brown eyes with a slitted pupil. Going further down you could see her jounin flak jacket and brownish shirt, hiding what I believe to be small D-cup breast. She stood at 5 feet 5 inches, and she was 23 years old. She was Inuzuka Tsume, and sitting next to her was her companion Kuramaru. He was a gruff and rough-looking dog. He had an eye patch over his right eye and was tall enough to reach Tsume's waist. He had a bluish coat on top of his body with a white coat for his underbody. Man, for an old bastard, you sure can make jokes? She said, laughing more. The weak Ki coming from Tsukumi wasn't affecting her in any way, but the Ki coming from the Hokage made her stop laughing. She chuckled weakly as she said, Sorry, Hokage-sama. Continue, please, she said, adding the please for an added measure. Sarutobi nodded at her, accepting the apology. Now Sakumi, I'm sorry, but I can't kill this child, he said, raising his hand, stopping her retort. I can't and won't kill this child because he has the strongest lineage this village has ever produced. I'm sure you all remember the Uzumaki clan? He asked the council, watching them nod their heads. Well, this is the heir to that clan, but not only that clan, he is also the heir to the Namikaze clan. He added, watching their reactions. The room was yet again sent into an uproar. Many saying liar and others saying where's the proof? It wasn't until Aburame Shibi spoke up. You're right, I can see the resemblance. It's as clear as day. Who else in this entire village has blonde hair like that? If you take away the whisker marks on the boy's cheeks, then you have an exact replica of the Yondaime Hokage. The man spoke, shutting up everyone with his general logic. This man stood at 5 feet 8 inches. He was 30 years old. I'm sorry, but that is all I can tell you. Is he was wearing a dark gray coat and hood that took away all of his features. He also wore a pair of black shades to take away the color of his eyes. But all of this didn't make everybody respect his logic. It was because he is considered the strongest in the village thanks to clan's Kikai bugs. But even his clan's bugs didn't do squat to the QB, as it destroyed every one of the bugs most of his clan members sent at it. He lost many of his clan members tonight. Well, nobody asked you, you freak. Sakumi muttered under her breath. It didn't get on Shibi's nerves like many thought it would, but it did get on somebody else's. Keep it quiet, some people are trying to sleep. This whole meeting is troublesome, the man said as he tried to attempt to go back to sleep. He was Nara Shikaku. He had black hair and a pineapple-like style, lazy brown eyes, and wore a jounin flak jacket and some kind of deer fur over it. He also wore some mesh under this with a black shirt going over that. He stood at 5 feet 7 inches and was 27 years old. Both of his teammates were on either side of him, Akimichi Chusa and Yamanaka Inoichi. Chusa was a large and kind man that was always eating. He wore some kind of armor and had a single purple squiggly thing on each of his cheeks. He was 27 years old and stood at 5 feet 6 inches. Yamanaka Inoichi was also a kind man that could be fierce when he wanted to, just like any other ninja in Konoha. He wore the regular jounin outfit and had some kind of faded blonde hair in a long ponytail. He stood at 5 feet and 11 inches and was 27 years old. These three men made up a special group called Ino Shikacho. They were put together in the Second Shinobi War and were made famous with their impressive teamwork. Everything to you is troublesome, Shikaku, both Chusa and Inoichi said. The Hokage cleared his throat to get the attention on him again. Well, if all of you are done interrupting this meeting, I would like to continue. Now where was I? He asked himself. Oh, that's right, why I couldn't or wouldn't kill the child, not only because it is the heir to both the Uzumaki and Namikaze clans, but there's one other thing that I suspect each and every one of you will be surprised by, none more than you Fugaku, he said, looking at the Uchiha clan head. This made the Uchiha confused, as he didn't know anything that could really surprise him. What is it, Hokage-sama? He asked, feeling anxiety of the moment. The Hokage tilted his hat down, shadowing his eyes as he spoke. It's the real reason why I want kill the child. It's because he has the Sharingan, he said. Everyone's eyes widened to epic proportions as they couldn't believe the information that was just given to them. Even the civilians' eyes widened. The same civvies that didn't know a single thing about Ninja World. The biggest surprise didn't even come yet as the Sandaime continued speaking. Also, the Sharingan is fully matured, he added, making most nearly faint at that last piece of information. Danzu couldn't let the opportunity pass up as he quickly stood up. Sarutobi, you must let me train him, to properly teach him what he needs to survive the harsh realities of the shinobi world. Under my tutelage, he'll soon become the strongest in the village, maybe even the whole elemental nations, and he'll be loyal to this village, he said with his power-hungry voice. No, Hokage-sama, you can't have him train Naruto-san. He'll make Naruto-san loyal to only him. Since he does have the Sharingan, that means that he is an Uchiha and thus should be trained by my clan and live in my compound. Fugaku spoke in a strong voice as he too stood up to his feet. Before the Hokage could give his answer, he was interrupted again. Pardon my interruptions, Hokage-sama, but if I may ask, how exactly did the child gain a fully matured Sharingan in the first place? Shikaku asked, getting everyone's attention, as they too pondered the question. This also got the Hokage thinking as he too pondered the question himself. Flashback. The Kyuubi had just been sealed into the child when it entered the child's mind where it would rest up. But before it did, he noticed something off about this baby. Wait, this feels familiar. Wait a minute, this is an Uzumaki baby. New. It started to make noise as it crashed around in his cage. In heaven, a woman with red hair and angel wings suddenly found herself smirking for no apparent reason. Kyuubi continued to crash into his cage when he noticed something on the other side of his cage. Two somethings as he looked at them. One was a big red ball of energy, and the other was a big ball of blue energy. He then noticed something else about his new container. This boy is a descendant of one of my creations, like Kushina. He thought the name Kushina like it was poisonous to his mind. I don't know any other people I hate more than her. Well, maybe Madara, but he's burning in hell, so he doesn't count. Well, with this child I'll set my mistakes straight and have him kill the ones I want. He thought as he made his chakra move quickly and release both of the energy balls, causing them to spread around the boy's chakra system, enlarging his chakra coils and making the child cry at the act. Shut up, Brad, it's getting noisy in here. I can't concentrate. He spoke to nothing, as he made his chakra hurry up, before the seal could finalize itself and shut off his chakra. He used his chakra to try and release the restrictions to the boy's Sharingan. Being the creator gave him the ability to do just that. As he finished, a luminescent eye appeared in front of him, showing different forms of the Manjikyu Sharingan. Before it rested on the same four-pointed star Kushina had, it went through the regular Sharingan forms before it rested on the three spinning Kama form, and then disappearing altogether. He marveled at his work, before making himself comfortable and falling into a deep sleep, awaiting the time when he finally meets his container face to face in the future. End flashback. The Hokage shrugged his shoulders, not knowing the answer. I guess that having the Kyuubi shoved his gut made his bloodlines unlock themselves, automatically. He said, not knowing he was half right. So, if you can't kill it, what are you going to do with the boy? Udatane Koharu asked. She was an old woman that was on a genin team with Hamura and Hiruzen. They all were taught under Tobarama, the Nidaime of Hokage. What I'm going to do, Koharu, is my own decision. This meeting is over, you're all dismissed, leave my sights. He said, putting his head in one hand and waved the council away with his other. Finally! Yelled Shikaku as he literally ran out of the room. His teammates chuckled lowly. I wonder when he'll remember about his wife waiting at home for him? Chusa asked. Soon the room was empty, and we see the Hokage in his office with Inu, who took off his mask to show him wearing another mask underneath it. But now with his mask off we can call him Hatake Kakashi, or the copycat ninja. So Hokage-sama, what are you going to do with Naruto-kun? You know, I could take him in as my son if what you're saying is true about him being Sensei's kid. He said, handing the child over to his leader. Sarutobi shook his head. No, Kakashi. I still need you in ANBU. The child will go live with the Uchihas. But don't worry about that, he will also join my ANBU forces. He said, holding up his hand, seeing Kakashi about to disagree with him. It's my decision, and plus after releasing all of that information about the child's heritage, I fear that IWA will try to abduct him. Sometime in the future, it's for his own safety. He must live in the darkness to keep others safe. I'll release him to the Uchihas when I deem him strong enough to protect himself from most jounins. The Kakashi was surprised at this. Really, Hokage-sama? Who do you know that can do that in the village? Kakashi asked. The Sandaime looked at him like he was stupid. Well, I don't know, maybe me, he said sarcastically, making Kakashi's eyes widen a little. I mean, come on, how hard can it be? He asked, looking at the child on his desk. He had no idea what he was getting himself into this time. Hokage's personal training ground. Right now we see little Naruto and Sarutobi sparring in the training ground behind the Hokage Tower. And even with the Hokage's knowledge of the shinobi arts, he was stumped, and still is, for the past 6 years while training this boy. He couldn't believe the kid. As soon as he learned to walk, he was training, absorbing all kinds of information like a sponge. And he was still learning everything he threw at him. It was getting frustrated finding things to teach the boy. He knew all E, D, C, and B rank jutsus in the village already. Okay, he was exaggerating, he didn't know all of the jutsus for those ranks, but he knew most of them, and of all elements too. Let's not forget about taijutsu either. Since he was very old, he called his village's taijutsu expert Mato Guy, a truly weird individual but was faster and physically stronger than all in the village without the use chakra, so even his student Tsunade would get beaten by this guy in a straight-up taijutsu fight. He was around 24 years old, and wore the most hideous green spandex suit in the whole elemental nations, most like the whole world, but it had its purpose in getting rid of the air resistance when he was moving, making him even faster. Well, like he was saying, Guy began to teach young Naruto. He was a little against it as his training really pushes the muscles to their limit, and then when the warm-up was over, the real training began. And since Naruto had been getting trained by him since he was age 3, that means that he was a little more buffer, lean, a little bit too stronger for someone his age. And even then his training had to progress faster after what happened sometime before Naruto turned 4. It was the reason why he enlisted Naruto into the Anbu Corps shortly after. 2 years ago, give or take a few of the months, Naruto had just gotten out of training with his sensei, Guy, and he was super tired from the brutal training he was put through. And even though he had been doing this kind of training for a couple of months, he was still tired, and yet he never complained since taijutsu was the only thing he could work on for the time since Hokage Jiji said that even though his chakra reserves were higher than everybody's in the village, that he had to let it settle before he started to do anything chakra-related. He was sore as he wandered through the forest in search of the Hokage's compound around the area. It was always a little hard to navigate through the forest during the new moon, as even his demon-enhanced eyes needed just a little light to fully work, so everything he was seeing was just a little fuzzy. After a while of walking, his ninja senses started to go off, and he jumped to the left, evading a couple of kunai. He activated his Sharingan and looked at his attackers, and even though Gigi told him not to do anything chakra-related, it was just second nature for him to activate his Sharingan. In front of him were 5 Anbu, or they looked like Anbu. He did notice the scent of wet soil and magnesium, a common element in Tsuchi no Kuni, so that meant they were ninja from Iwagakure. Gigi had warned him of that village. He said information, no matter how important to a village, will somehow end up being leaked outside a village. That was something he told him when he first began his studies. He also told him, because you hold the Kyuubi and the public knows this, they will try to do things to take their anger out on you, even if they have to give up the heir to important clans of the village, vengeance and revenge. It's very important not to have these emotions corrupt your mind, you understand, Naruto-kun? He had asked him. Well, look at what we have here. It looks like the son of the great Kuroi no Senku is all alone, and with no one to protect him. Come on guys, let's take care of him for a while. The man in the middle said, indicating that he was the leader of the squad. The man on the right side of the leader began chuckling. Yeah, and by take care of you, he doesn't mean we're going to sit down to a nice cup of tea. He means we're going to beat you up, he said, laughing hysterically. The leader looked at him. Thanks, Jackal. You're the best subordinate I have ever had, he said sarcastically. What, I thought I was the best? That's not fair. I work way more than he does. A very tall and muscular man said from behind the leader. No, Raccoon, you're also my best subordinate, the leader said. This time another tall man became loud. What, Taicho? I thought I was the best, you just told yesterday. This man was just as tall as Raccoon, but not as muscular. The captain then looked at him. Now Boar, now is not the time to get pissy, you're all my best minions, yes, even you Gecko, he said, looking at the last member of his team. This one was by far nearly shorter than Naruto himself. And speaking of Naruto, he knew he should have left or attacked by now, but he was rooted to his spot, and he didn't know why, as he watched as the team of dust members argued with each other, with a huge sweat drop behind him. He cleared his throat. Yeah, so as much as I would love to hear you 5 argue, I got to get home and get some dinner and rest, so yeah, he said as he started backing away from them. They turned their attention on him, and the leader began talking. Yeah, sorry about that, kid. So where were we? Oh yeah, now we're going to kill you, so it's only respectful to know the names of the one who is going to kill you. I am the leader of this elite fighting force, Captain Goat, and we are the men who stare at goats, he said as he and his whole team struck a pose together, making Naruto's sweat drop becoming even bigger, nearly toppling him. Naruto did shake his head after a while as the team stayed in their pose. I'm gonna have nightmares of these people after this is done. And even though, like I said earlier, he was still tired from his earlier training, so he only had one chance of getting out of this situation alive and sane. He quickly took out a pellet from his pocket, dug his nail into it and quickly threw the pellet into the air, where it exploded in a bright flare of fire. It was a signal flare the Hokage gave to him. He had it specially designed for people that couldn't use chakra for the original signal fire. And before the pellet even exploded, he had turned around and bolted out of there, in hopes of getting to the Hokage before they caught up to him. And catch up to him they did as they appeared in front of him, but he was still going, and the first attack went through the dust member Gecko as his fist went through the mask and into his face, shattering the skull, and it was all thanks of the speed he was moving and the strength behind his strike. This was his first kill, but he didn't have time to be devastating at taking a life as the others responded. Jackal sent a punch at his face. Boar tried to sweep him under his feet, while Raccoon coming from above with a downward strike, using both hands clenched together, making a much larger single fist. And everything was timed perfectly, from getting punched, then swept, and then pummeled into the ground, except he was a regular person as he had his Sharingan, which predicted the whole thing, so he simply jumped backwards where Goat was waiting for him. But back to the other three, they had crashed into each other. Boar was hit with Raccoon's attack and his leg snapped, nearly making him scream in pain, and if it wasn't for his pain tolerance training he would have. Let's not forget about Jackal. Raccoon's attack had went through his shoulder and continued on to Boar's leg. He was the one that screamed. Now back to Naruto. He was trying to avoid the captain's strikes, and it was only because of the Sharingan that it was happening. He was quickly getting more exhausted as time went by. He was also fortunate that he remembered about the others, and while they were arguing with each other to watch where they were going, he quickly sent a kunai at their heads. 2 out of 3 wasn't so bad, as Raccoon had dodged his, seeing it coming. And now it was 2-on-1, and they got their break as fatigue fully set in for Naruto as he couldn't dodge the recent snap kick from Goat. And that was when the beating started. They started kicking and punching him in all places as they were doing damage to his little hard body. It was a full 30 seconds later that the Hokage and a full platoon of Anbu appeared at the scene and killed the intruders. The Hokage quickly and carefully picked up Naruto's beaten and battered body. He had a completely swollen face, and blood coming out of cuts and bruises all over his body. His clothes had been nearly completely torn off of him, and his arms and legs were crushed, but looked like it was beginning to slowly heal, as the Kyuubi was doing everything in its limited power to heal up Naruto's body. And it had its work cut out for it, as Naruto suffered many broken ribs and internal bleeding, not to mention a cracked skull. It took 3 full months for Naruto to completely heal from the damage that his body had sustained. The Sandaime walked into the hospital room like he had been doing for the past 3 months and checked on Naruto. He was awoke with the head doctor in the room with him, finishing up her analysis. Well, Naruto, it looks like you're completely healed and healthy. Now remember, no training for another month to let your muscles finish healing, she said, knowing that he was being trained by the Hokage himself and was pretty strong even now. Naruto grinned. Thank you, Ka-chan, he said happily as he hugged his mother figure. She had helped him these past 3 months with so much, like his first kill problem. That first month was hard on his mind, as he wished he wouldn't survive his injuries. But Nico-chan helped him with everything, telling him that he shouldn't even be training or fighting so early in his life. He was only 3 for Kami's sakes. But she soon started to understand that without his training he never would have known how to signal help and fight off the enemy until help arrived. They finally noticed the Hokage in the room. Oh, Hokage-sama, when did you get here? Nico said, looking at the Hokage, but still had Naruto in her arms. Hey Gigi, Naruto said, waving one of his hands to the Sandaime. Hiruzen smiled at the sight. Ever since Naruto-kun had met Nico, he had become attached to her, calling her Ka-san, and she always called him her Sochi. She never had. Was it because Nico had also been an orphan in her younger days, or was it her womanly charms? Oh, I've been here for a while now. Can I have a moment with Naruto alone, please? He asked the woman, who nodded and walked out of the room. Naruto, I've been thinking about what happened 3 months ago, and I came to the decision to put you in the ANBU Corps. You will be seriously trained and groomed to become a fully fledged ANBU in time. This means that I'm going to up your training. I have no doubts that in the beginning you'll start to curse my name, but soon you'll start to see the results of your training. And then after giving you a simulated mission, we'll see if you'll be capable to finally become an ANBU. So what do you say? Would you like to become stronger? Sarutobi said as his eyes burned with fire at the end of his speech. Naruto just smirked and jumped out of bed. Did you really have to ask that, Aji-san? I'm not gonna have my ass handed to me after what happened. No more I say. Next time they won't even have a chance to apologize to me. They'll already be dead. Naruto said with his eyes burning at the end of his speech. And plus hospital food sucks. He added, ruining the moment and making the Hokage laugh. End flashback. And now after all that training he was as strong as his elite jounin, so he may have went a little overboard with the training, but it had to be done. On the day of his simulated Anbu-like mission he passed with flying colors, and even when his teammates were captured, and he had that decision to either save them or complete the mission, he didn't panic and did both. Using the forbidden jutsu, the shadow clone technique, he was able to have them complete the mission, which was to blow up a bridge, to prevent enemy troops from crossing over, while his shadow clones stealthily stormed the place where his teammates were captured, and saved them, and they all went home, mission accomplished. Later that day, Sarutobi told him that the mission he had done was one his father had done with his team. Rin was the one captured and Kakashi and Obito had that decision of completing the mission or saving a comrade, and the end result wasn't pretty as Obito later lost his life. Kakashi became more secluded and Rin, well, not even he knew where she went. He then told him about Kakashi's father and how he had a similar dilemma, and he saved his comrades other than finishing his mission, and was ridiculed because of it, which led him to take his own life. Learn from past experiences and you'll know, when the time comes, what choice is the right choice. Okay, back to them. They had ended the spar. You just keep getting stronger and stronger, Naruto, so are you ready to fully join the ANBU? You've just received the okay from the ANBU commander, Tora. So when you're ready, we'll go over there and you'll receive your armor, mask, codename, ANBU registration number, and lastly your ANBU tattoo. Later you'll be put on a team to work with. Sarutobi said, moving around and then taking of a part of his battle armor. As Naruto's strength had put a huge dent in it, his armor was getting more older and more rusty the less he used and polished them, and he hadn't did that in the last decade, so he needed new ones. Damn, Naruto, you broke my armor. You need to watch your strength, he said as he fully took the broken piece of armor off. Naruto chuckled sheepishly and rubbed the back of his head. Sorry about that, GG. It's just that I know where your armor's weak points are and I had to exploit it, but maybe I did use too much power, he said, getting into his thinking pose, which was to rub his chin and narrow his eyes a little. So Aji-san, can we go to HQ now? I don't want to keep the Sotecho waiting, now do we? He said after a while of thinking. The Hokage smirked. I thought you'd never ask, he said as he grabbed Naruto's shoulder and they body flickered away. Later they appeared in front of a rundown old building that was a part of Konoha that was destroyed by the Kyuubi years ago. The commander felt that it was a great idea to put headquarters here in the place that no person will go ever again. So they closed it off, built a giant wall around it, and then a wall to protect that the HQ, and yet they only use one building, kind of a waste of space if you ask Naruto. The Hokage opened the door and they met darkness after walking in that darkness for what felt like hours, but was only a couple of minutes. Sarutobi opened another door, and then they entered the real HQ after going down the elevator that was in the previous room. It was there that they felt more eyes on them. There were ANBU everywhere in the large and spacious room, some with their masks on and some without. The ones without were people he most likely already seen, so they wasn't worrying about putting their mask back on, because if what they heard was true, then the kid will join them in secrecy pretty soon. They entered another room where someone was waiting for them. It wasn't the commander, just someone else, Usagi, if what he could make out of the person's mask. Alright, we already had your measurements, so here goes your armor you'll wear whenever you done your ANBU mask, the woman said as she gave Naruto his armor. Naruto then went to a changing room and changed into his armor. It was deep black colored, a nice color if you asked him. Must have been specially made by the Hokage, since the others he had seen had something looked like light gray. He walked out in his armor, and the Sandaime nodded his head in approval. I knew black was going to be a good color for you, he said as he handed him something else. Here, this is what you'll wear when you're undercover and what not, he said as he handed him a black cloak. Naruto nodded and put it on over his armor and kept the hood off. After that, Sarutobi and Naruto entered another room. This one was completely dark, save for a couple of spotlights, showing dozens of masks behind protective glass. Naruto knew what he had to do, so he walked around, looking for a mask that would fit his personality, and he saw the perfect one. It was a kitsune mask, and he picked it. An Anbu appeared out of nowhere, wearing an Saru mask. So you picked the kitsune mask. Did you know that this mask has not been picked ever since the Kyuubi attack, and the only one that had it later killed himself because he was representing such a monster? He asked the boy. Don't answer that, of course you don't know. She said after seeing Naruto's confused face and got the mask for him. And Naruto put it on, making it stick with chakra. He was also getting the feel for it, like checking the weight it had, and if he could see clearly through it. He liked what he was seeing. As he activated his Sharingan for a quick second to check with it, he deactivated it and took off the mask and put it slanted on his head and nodded to the man. The Hiruzen then spoke from behind him. Okay, Naruto, your ANBU registration number will now be 01TA8579N6. He said, writing it down in the ANBU's registration manual. They left and entered another room. This room was round and had a balcony going around it, and in the middle of the room was a chair that he knew was where he would get his ANBU tattoo and become a full-fledged ANBU, a rookie, but an ANBU nonetheless. Up in the balconies were the entire ANBU corps, and they were there to witness the induction of their youngest and most known member. Everyone in the ANBU corps knew about the young blonde. He was the son of the 4th Hokage and Uzumaki Kushina. Those two were legends in their lifetime, and even to this very day, legends they remain. They also knew about the Sharingan he had since birth. Inu Kakashi wasn't going to be the only one in the corps to have a Sharingan now. Naruto sat in a chair when somebody sat down in the chair next to him. He sat down some items next to him. This was the ANBU commander, Tora. It was customary for the ANBU commander to finalize any inductee by tattooing the ANBU symbol of their left shoulder. Give me your arm, boy, he said in a stern voice. Naruto held out his left arm, and Tora took some blood from it and put Naruto's blood in the bucket of ink and mixed it around. The wound then closed up with a little vapor coming off of it. After properly mixing the blood with the ink, he held it up to Naruto's hand. Put some of your chakra in the ink, he said again, as Naruto did as he was told. He watched as his chakra fused with the ink, and yet the man kept the bucket up to his hand. Now add some of the Kyuubi's chakra in there, he said, and Naruto struggled, but accomplished the task of adding Kyuubi's chakra into the bucket and watched as the ink bubbled for a while before it settled. The man nodded and proceeded to give him a tattoo of the ANBU symbol. Naruto didn't scream or wince at the pain, because somewhere in his subconscious he knew that this was a test to check his pain tolerance. And if he couldn't handle it, then the tattoo wouldn't get complete and he'll be kicked out of the ANBU before he could even start. The man finished the tat and stood up. Congratulations, you are now ANBU. The man said with his gruff and stern voice gone. It was replaced with a deep and yet easygoing voice. He began to speak louder as he was talking to the whole corps now. I want you all to welcome our newest member, Kitsune. Know that because you are the Jinchuriki for the Kyuubi that you will not be treated in any less way, and receive the same kind of respect from all members, am I right, everybody? He said as the ANBU all around began to cheer for their newest brother. The man turned back to Naruto. Now you have your first mission. Naruto looked back to the man. What is the mission, and I'll see that it is completed quickly and successfully, he said as he stared the man in his eye. The man smirked at the kid's determination. Your first mission is to swear your loyalty to the Hokage, he said, watching Naruto nodded and turn around facing the Hokage. Naruto stared at the Hokage, activating his Sharingan, and bowed on his knees. I Namikaze Uzumaki Naruto aka Kitsune, member of the elite ANBU Corps, swear allegiance to the Hokage of Konoha Corps. I swear to protect and serve this man and achieve anything and everything I am told. He finished talking and stayed on his knee and left his head bowed. The Hokage looked at him. Raise your head. He spoke in a commanding voice and watched as Naruto did as he was told. He then took out a scroll and unsealed 4 swords, a katana, nodachi, kodachi, and a ninjutsu. He laid them on the floor and said a simple phrase. Choose wisely, he said. Naruto looked at each of the swords, knowing that whatever sword he picked will be his weapon until his death. Or if he ever leaves ANBU, but that'll never happen, right? He picked up the katana, knowing that even though he was short now he'll grow taller and be able to use it properly. He took his sword and strapped it to his back under his cloak, making the handle stick out at the top. It was like the sword was a Zanbato compared to the kid, as it was nearly taller than he was. Sword, 3 feet. Naruto, 3 feet 4 inches. Tora walked up to the kid and clasped his hand on his left shoulder. I would like to personally welcome you to what we jokingly call the Brotherhood. The man said as he and the rest of the Anbu all laughed heartedly at the joke. It didn't take Naruto a long time before he too started laughing. A week later, Naruto and Sarutobi were walking to the latter's office after their afternoon training. They entered to see Uchiha Fugaku, and he was sitting at his desk waiting for them. Oh hey Fugaku-san, is it time already? He said as he sat down in his big OL comfy chair, sighing as he did so. The man nodded as he looked at Naruto, standing beside the Hokage. I can't believe this is the first time I actually get to meet you, Naruto-kun. It's nice to meet you, he said, putting out his hand for a shake. Naruto looked at the hand weirdly before shaking it. Not to be disrespectful, but who are you? He said, causing Fugaku to laugh a little. The Hokage looked at Naruto. This is the man I was telling you about just now. This is Uchiha Fugaku. He is adopting you into his family, the Uchiha clan. Their compound is where you will now be staying and trained. No buts, we talked about this also. Since you were born with the Sharingan, this man feels that you should live with others that have the Sharingan, and they will teach you how to use your Sharingan properly. He said, holding up his hand to prevent Naruto from saying but. But Gigi, I already know how to use my Sharingan properly. He said, activating his Sharingan and making it spin very quickly. Fine, he said as the Hokage didn't budge in his decision. He turned to Fugaku. So do I have to call you Two-san or something? He asked the man, making him laugh again and shake his head no. No, my boy, you don't need to call me your father, but you will be staying in the same house as my family, though my wife will love it if you called her Ka-san. He said as the Sandaime finally gathered the papers he was looking for and gave them to Fugaku for signing and jotted down his final approving. Naruto's new name was Namikaze Uzumaki Uchiha Naruto, and he had a new home to go to. After Naruto also signed his name, the one before and the one after, he left with Fugaku. They walked through the village, many looking at them curiously, because they wanted to know why the demon was walking with the Uchiha clan head. They seen them enter the Uchiha compound and came to the conclusion that the demon was adopted into one of the most prestigious clans of the village, meaning that they better had changed their minds on him or suffer the wrath of the Uchiha. Naruto had only been in public a couple of times in his short 6 years of life, and out of all those times he liked this one better. The other times he would always be glared at, even if he was with the Hokage of the village, and even if he was the son of the Yondaime, though he didn't think they knew that detail, just the demon part. He couldn't help but smirk at the look on their faces after seeing him walk with the head Uchiha. Maybe being with this family won't be so bad after all. He thought as he watched the man nod to the passing Uchiha, and some of the girls giggling at him. He guessed that they loved the color of his eyes. Blue-gray is the best of them all, it's like a cloudy sky. They soon walked up to his new home. When they entered, they seen 2 boys talking about the training that the eldest promised to put the youngest through. A woman came from the kitchen with an apron over her dress. Boys, calm down. Your father will be here any moment, and you don't want him to see you 2 argue, she said to her 2 sons, as the eldest poked his younger brother in the forehead. Too late, said a voice from the doorway. I'm already here with a new addition to the family. Go on, introduce yourself, he said to the boy, lightly moving Naruto in front of him. Naruto sighed as he was moved. He waved his hand. Hi, my name's Namikaze Uzumaki Uchiha Naruto, and I was just adopted by this man here. So I hope you'll respect me as I'll respect you, he said to the family. Makoto nearly squealed. Hi, I'm Makoto. You can call me Ka-san, and these are my sons Itachi and Sasuke. You can call them your brothers, said Makoto. She was a beautiful woman, around 29 years old, a medium-sized D-cup breast. She had long black hair that reached her shoulder blades. She wore a brown dress and had a beige apron over it, which she just took off. She was wearing any shoes as that was some kind of tradition in all households. She was a retired jounin that stood at the height of 5 feet 2 inches. He knew that because she suddenly appeared in front of him and hugged him to her breast. Welcome to the family, we have been expecting you. She let him go after she heard him gasping for breath. Sorry about that, I'm just so happy, she said, grabbing his hand and dragging him to the table and sat him down. Lunch will be here any minute now, wait right there, she said, skipping to the kitchen, humming a small tune. Naruto was just staring at her as she skipped to the kitchen. He was a little embarrassed at what had just happened, until he remembered she said something about lunch. He looked at her two sons. What is she making for lunch? Is it dango? Naruto said eagerly. Itachi spoke. No, she's making udon. Itachi looked like a nice boy. He had a mysterious line on each side of his nose. He was wearing the clan's regular high-collared dark gray shirt and black shorts. He was around the age of 9 and stood at 4 feet 5 inches. He was sitting at the table cross-legged and he was eating some pocky from under the table. You say that like you hate udon, Itachi and I. Sasuke said from beside his brother. Sasuke was Itachi's younger brother. Around the age of 5, he was still rubbing his forehead where Itachi had poked him. He too wore the high-collared shirt. His was black and he wore light gray shorts. His hair was unlike his brother's, which wasn't spiky like his. His brother's hair framed his face in front and was tied in a short ponytail in the back. His also framed his face but got spiky in the back, making it resemble a certain animal's backside. I do like it, I was just answering his question, Otudo. Whatever. So Naruto, do you have anything you like other than dango? He asked him, curious about his new family member. Naruto went into his thinking pose. Well, I like many other things, they're just too many to tell you, but I do hate salted octopus, it tastes weird to me. If you leave the salt out of it, then I'll gladly eat it. He said as Makoto came out of the kitchen with a bowl of udon in each hand and one balanced on her head. Makoto-san, he started to say when she glared dangerously at him. Ka-san. I'll be glad to help if you want me to, he said, pointing to the bowl on her head. Ah, that's so nice of you. Too bad none of my other kids have manners like you do, she said, letting him get the bowl from her head. Just for that you can get seconds whenever you like, she said, smiling at him. The other boys in the room yelled, What? What? I do have manners. I just didn't know you'll come out of the kitchen carrying all the bowls, they said at the same time. She just said, Excuses, excuses. Naruto rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. Ah, that's nothing. Teaching me manners was the first thing Gigi taught me, he said, chuckling nervously, as both of the boys glared at him. They all sat down and ate after Makoto called Fugaku from his study to join them in having lunch. All of them were chuckling and enjoying each other's company as Naruto thought, this isn't so bad. This family is nice to be with, and plus I better enjoy myself while I'm with them because I'm gonna have to do some missions pretty soon. I can feel it in my bones, he thought as he finished his udon. Later that night, he knew that he'll have to do a mission soon. As an Anbu wearing an Inu mask appeared in the room he got from Makoto, it was a nice and clean room. He got up and unsealed his Anbu attire from his colorless seal located on the back of his right hand. He got dressed and donned his kitsune mask, and they soon left the compound towards the village's eastern gates, not knowing that Itachi seen them leave through his bedroom window. They reached the gate and met up with two other Anbu members, one wearing a Nico mask and the other wearing an Hibi mask. They both had their Anbu tattoos on their right shoulder showing that they were females. We're here, I had to get him, for his first real mission, Inu said from behind his mask. Well, at least you're here now. Let's get started. The mission isn't going to finish itself, Hibi said. She had purple hair and pupil-less brown eyes. She stood at 5 feet 3 inches and had light gray armor under her black cloak. You're so impatient, why don't you just calm down? Nico said, and they began to argue with each other. Can both of you be quiet? Nico, why don't you at least act like you're my lieutenant? And Hibi, we'll leave right now, just calm down. Inu commanded them calmly. He then looked at Naruto. Don't worry about them. They're really good friends. Now show us why the Hokage himself put you in Anbu, he said as they all vanished and started their nighttime adventures. Chapter 4. Congratulations and relax. Outside of Konoha's walls. The forest was always peaceful at night. The stars were out, and the moon shining on the forest below. Animals turning in to sleep and predators relaxing after a great meal. And do you know the best thing? The team of Anbu didn't disrupt the atmosphere at all. Following the team, we see 3 figures. Wait, that's 4 figures. The fourth was just short. and yet his height didn't hinder him at all, as he was keeping up with the other's speed. Kitsune was irritated as he was jumping tree to tree. Why? Because he couldn't believe what his first mission assignment was as an ANBU border patrol. Seriously, they woke me up for this. He thought, happy that his face was covered by his mask so that his squad members couldn't see his scowl. Well, at least he thought that they didn't notice. His comrade Nico turned to him. "What's wrong, Kitsune-kun?" she asked, noticing his tense neck muscles. Kitsune turned to his worried squad member. "Nothing. Why would you think something is wrong?" he said. She quietly giggled. "Because your neck has been tense ever since the mission briefing." Kitsune's eyes widened a little at that, until he remembered that she was ANBU, and that was one of the skills in being ANBU, being able to notice the little things and use them as an advantage for other things. You don't have to be so tense, you never know what could happen on these missions, but it's best to always hope for the worst so that you'll never be surprised during the mission, you understand? She said after a while. You know, she is right, Kitsune-kun, but she left out the most simplest detail in being an ANBU. You have to always be on your guard when on duty. You can never relax until you are off duty. So for now on, be prepared to be awake for many nights in a row. Hebe said, slightly turning her head and looking in his eye holes for a brief second, seeing his activated Sharingan eyes. Girls, quit pestering Kitsune. This is his first mission. Border Patrol is always an ANBU's first mission. It's to prepare them of long nights of sleep and being on guard and some other stuff I forgot. Inu then gave a deep reminiscent sigh. I remember my first mission. I was asleep for days after it. He said, holding up his hand, signaling his subordinates to halt. They stopped and overlooked the clearing in view, seeing a bandit camp inside of Haino Kuni. Now that was something they couldn't have that. Looking in the campsite, they could see a total of 14 bandits, and though they didn't see any civilians, they could smell the heavy scent of blood and burning flesh, meaning that they had people there earlier and burned the bodies, likely to get rid of evidence of them even being there. Okay, these goons must be eliminated. They cannot continue living if this is what they're going to do with their lives. He then looked at his rookie ANBU. You okay with killing others? I am unaware if you have killed before? Inu asked, keeping his voice down. Yes, I'm okay with it. I had my first kill a few months before I turned 4. I'm pretty sure I can handle these weak bandits, he said, ignoring the concerned words of the female members of the squad. Ah, you poor baby, Nico said, pulling Kitsune into her chest. The only things keep his face from her breast were his mask and her armor. I'm okay, Nico. I killed 3 out of the 5, but I was put in the hospital for 3 months. Let's not talk about this now. We have to get rid of these bandits, he said as Nico let go of him, and they all looked over the camp. All right, squad, this is what we are going to do. Kitsune, I want you to take all the bandits in the east of the camp. Hebe, you got west, Nico, you get south, and I'll get north. All right, you have your orders. I want these kills to be silently. Wait for my signal and then attack. Inu ordered as they all went to their positions. Kitsune went to the east of the camp, and if you divide the camp up correctly, then that means that he has 6 bandits to kill. No, wait, 7. The food was being served in the east, and they were eating. Fortunately for him, their backs were turned to the forest, meaning he could easily kill them all when the signal was given. Nico went to the south, the area where only 3 bandits were. This area was where the tents were, and her targets were busy sleeping after having a busy day. Hebe went to the west where 3 bandits were. These bandits were towards the middle, using the light of the fire to play poker, and from the looks of it they sucked. They all were getting bad cards. She sighed at Kitsune having the most bandits on his side. Lucky brat, she thought. Inu stayed in the north and watched as the leader was coming up with a plan to attack the nearby village again, and this time take more than just money and women. Maybe I should kidnap the mayor's daughter and get some money and food out of that, and he'll get her back after I had my fun with her, the bandit leader said loud enough for Inu to hear. And speaking of Inu, he held up his hand in view of his team, in the open palm position, and when he closed it, the attack started. The team of ANBU launched into the clearing stealthily and killed the ones they were assigned. Kitsune threw multiple kunai at his targets, and before you know, 6 were down. He only threw 6 because he wanted to do this personally. He ran up to the remaining bandit just as he noticed his comrades were falling to the ground. He was about to yell out to the boss when his throat was cut, and all that came out was the gurgling sound of him drowning in his own blood before quiet set in. Nico ran through the tents, quietly slitting the throats of the bandits. Hebe jumped high in the air, landed on the table, and while the bandits looked surprised, she spun in a circle and decapitated all of them with her ninjutsu. Inu just dropped from his perch and sliced the leader down the middle with his own ninjutsu. The met in the middle where Hebe was sitting on the table, without an ounce of blood on her. She leaped off and landed in front of her comrades. That wasn't so bad, but I still don't like that Kitsune-kun got the most bandits to kill. It's so unfair, she said, crossing her arms. I'm sorry, Hebe-chan, is there something I can do to make it up to you? Kitsune asked him, not seeing or hearing the rest of his teammates waving their hands in the no motion. Hebe just gasped happily. Sure there is. The minute we get back to the village you can treat me to some dango, she said, moving her mask to the side a little bit, and kissed him on the cheek and started skipping away happily. Kitsune just stood there in disbelief. What did I just get myself into? He asked out loud. The others shook their heads. She's going to stick to you like glue now, they both said, and followed Hebe out of the clearing. 6 a.m. The next day. The team returned after a short time doing border patrol. Usually a team would do border patrols for a week and up, but since this was Kitsune's first mission, the Hokage didn't want his skills to be wasted on doing border control. When they reached the gates, Kitsune let out a big yawn. He had been doing this for the past hour and a half, and his team was getting annoyed at its consistency. Okay, that's the last straw. Either stop yawning or I'm doubling the amount of dango you're treating me to, Hebe said, exploding at hearing the latest yawn. Hebe, what did I tell you about yelling at Kitsune-kun? You have to remember, even if he has the skills to be in ANBU, he's still a kid and kids need sleep, Nico said, defending Kitsune. Hebe gave a deep and heavy sigh as they passed the gate. Only 2 more years of this and I get to become a full interrogator and torturer, she thought dreamily. She stopped thinking when they entered the huge red tower the Hokage works at, ready to give her report. They all appeared in front of the Hokage and said at the same time while bowing, "Mission accomplished, Hokage-sama." Their voice matching perfectly, almost making it seem like one person talked. You could tell they were working on this. Hiruzen looked up from his paperwork, and even though he would never be working on paperwork at this hour, he was bored at the moment. He finished his book already, and reading it again took away the surprises that come the first time. Ah, Team Omega, I've been expecting you, he said happily. That something took him away from his paperwork. Tell me, how was Kitsune-kun's first mission? He asked, lighting his pipe. Inu smirked behind his mask. Well, he did very good. We encountered a bandit camp a couple of miles away from the northern border, and quickly dispatched of them. Yeah, with Kitsune-kun taking most of the kills, that's why he has to treat me to dango after this meeting, Hebe said, crossing her arms, causing Kitsune to chuckle nervously and rub the back of his head at having to be reminded of that. Sarutobi chuckled, as did the other members of Team Omega. Well, I feel sorry for you. Now Kitsune-kun, take off your mask for me, please, the Hokage said, as Kitsune did, and Naruto's face appeared, wearing a very bored face. You did great, Naruto-kun, congratulations, he said, smiling at his young charge. Naruto rubbed the back of his head sleepily, before lightly glaring at the Hokage. GG, if I get another border patrol mission, I'm gonna quit. That was most boringest thing I have ever did, he said, running his hand through his hair. Naruto-kun, what did I say about boringest? Not being a word, you have to quit using it, Sarutobi reprimanded his student. Naruto just sighed. Yes, Aji-sensei, he said, but then something happened that he didn't want to happen. He yawned. And Hebe promptly exploded. That's it, we're going to the dango stand. You guys could take care of the rest of the report, right? She said, taking off her mask, revealing a face that made Naruto's face turn red. It was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen, and he had seen some beautiful faces like Niko-ka-chan, Mikoto-ka-san. There was one when the Hokage took him to the Hyuga compound to have tea and learn proper manners. It was the Hitom-chan, the Hayashi's wife. And even when he was given his genjutsu lessons from Yuhi Kurinai, the genjutsu mistress herself, it didn't matter if she was only a chunin. With the genjutsus she knew, she could probably take on some of the most strongest, weak-minded shinobi in the elemental nations. She had eyes that were similar to his Sharingan, and they had the same hypnotizing ability. You could really just get lost looking into her eyes. Of course, you would think that just because he's only 6 that he wouldn't know what he's talking about. I only have this to say, age isn't nothing but a number. Now maturity is what he is looking for, and Hibi's revealed face showed a whole lot of maturity. Everybody was staring at Naruto, who was staring at Hibi. He had been doing this for the past minute or so, and it has been creeping Hibi out. Kid! You there? Hello? She said, snapping her fingers in front of his face. Only then did Naruto get out of his trance. Hawa, oh sorry. He said, rubbing his head in embarrassment. He didn't have any more time as Hibi put her mask back on and started dragging him to the window before body flickering out, and to HQ to change their clothes before going to the dango stand. 5 minutes later, Naruto walked out of his room in HQ and waited in front of Hibi's room, waiting for her to finish changing so he could get this over with. He didn't like giving up his dango for someone else's sake. But when Hibi walked out introducing herself as Mitarashi Anko, he said out loud, "But for you, I will make an exception." She made a face that showed her confusion before perking up. "Well, come on, let's go get me some dango," she said, grabbing his hand and dragging him outside HQ, before body flickering out and appearing in a nearby alley. There were barely anybody outside, and the ones outside were only opening their stores and getting ready for their day with a morning walk. Or run. As Guy stopped in front of them, "Naruto-kun, my youthful student, how's the life treating you? I bet it's pretty youthful, am I right?" he asked. "So how about we get some morning training done? Anko-san, you can join too," he said, grabbing both of their hands and sped off into the distance. 5 hours later, Anko and Naruto slumped their way into the dango stand at 11 a.m. When they walked in, they seen a girl with familiar purple hair and Kurenai, eating dango. "Oh, here they are, Nai-chan," the purple-haired girl said. Anko perked up a little at seeing her friends and walked over there, and Naruto followed, yawning as he sat down. Anko let it slide as she too yawned, after seeing him do it. "I'm never training with Guy ever again," Anko said, taking one of the dango skewers off the plate in the middle of the table. Naruto looked at her sleepily. Anko-chan, at least you finished the warm-up. That's great. Not many people can say that trained with Guy-sensei and passed the warm-up," Naruto said, proudly letting out another yawn. "Waitress, can I have a cup of coffee, please?" he asked. She looked at him funny. "Kid, we don't serve coffee to minors," she said, walking away. Naruto sighed. He called her over again. "Waitress, can I please have a cup of coffee?" he said, his eyes turning red for a while before going back to normal. She perked up. "Sure. How would you like to have it?" Naruto smiled and said, "Surprise me, please?" She nodded and went on her way. He looked at the table's occupants and found them looking at him. "What? I don't feel like having any problems today, and not getting served coffee, just because I'm a kid, was definitely going to be a problem," he said, putting his head down. "Go on, Anko-chan, order all the dango you want, as long as you save me some," he said, waving his hand in the air, waiting for his coffee. "You know, Yu-chan, we should have seen this coming," Anko said, ordering herself about 3 dozen skewers of dango and a bottle of sake. "I mean, he just go off of an all-night mission and then gets dragged into training with Guy for the past 5 hours. I'm surprised I'm not passed out," Anko added. "Yeah, I heard about Guy. He calls himself Konoha's green beast. I hear he's wicked strong and incredibly fast, and yet even with all that he has no sense of fashion," Kurenai said, taking a bite out of her own dango. The waitress came back and tapped Naruto on the shoulder, waking him up instantly. "Here you go. I got you black, with sugar and cream," she said, putting his coffee down. Naruto thanked her and gave her a 50 yen tip for the 10 yen coffee. She thanked him and went to her next table. Naruto took a sip from his coffee and looked around the table. "So what's your name, pretty lady?" he said, not wanting to say Nico while in public. She smiled at him. "Well, Naruto-kun, my name is Yuzuki Yugao. It's finally nice to meet the real you," she said, flipping her hair a little. "Now that I think about it, shouldn't you be getting back to the Uchiha compound? I bet Mitoko-san is worried about you. She doesn't know anything about. For all she knows, she probably think you've gotten kidnapped," Yugugo said. Naruto shot up in his chair at the mention of the Uchiha. "Oh yeah, I forgot all about them. Well, I'll just tell them that I got up really early to train with Guy-sensei, since it's the truth," he said, taking another sip from his coffee and getting up from his seat, before Anko yanked him back down. Hey, where do you think you're going? Don't try and skip out on paying for my dango. Now sit and watch us beautiful girls eat, she said, causing the other girls to giggle. Naruto's head dropped to the table, and the last thought before he fell asleep was, Mikoto-ka-san is going to kill me for worrying her. The three girls looked at the sleeping boy. He looks so cute when he's asleep, Yugugo said quietly so as to not wake him up. Kochan, are you sure that it was a good idea making him stay here? I mean, that chair is doing nothing for his back. He should be asleep in a soft bed. Kurenai said. Fine, I'll take him to your house and he can sleep in your bed. Are you happy? Anko said, smirking at Kurenai's blushing face. Well, give him a couple of years and then he'll get invited to my bed. She said on accident? Or was it? She didn't have time to cover her mouth, though, as the other two girls gasped. Nai-chan, do you like Naruto-kun? Whatever happened to Asuma-kun? Weren't you going to try and get with him when he came back from the capital? Yugugo asked, looking at her friend. Of course you like her, Nai-chan, you don't have to lie, you like him to Yukon. It's no doubt about that. Anko said, taking a bite from her last dango skewer and drinking the rest of her sake. So that means you like him to Kochan? Yugugo asked her skimpy-dressed friend. Of course, I just spent nearly a day with the kid. He has loads of stamina and he's incredibly strong, intelligent, his chakra reserves are through the roof, and lastly, in the future he'll grow up to be a very handsome and even more powerful young man, and since we have already established ourselves as the sexist in the village, there is no way that he won't grow more attached to us, she said, finishing her long speech. Chapter 5, New Team. Nearly 3 years later. Naruto was now 8 years old. Well, it was a little under 9 years old. His birthday was in a couple of months. Not that it mattered, he knew that he was going to be active on that day. He just took off his Anbu armor and sealed the rest of his equipment into the seal on the back of his hand, when Inu, his captain, walked into his quarters. Ah, Naruto-kun, I caught you in time, he said, taking off his mask, showing Kakashi. Naruto looked over his shoulder. Kakashi-senpai. What do you need? I thought you'll be home, relaxing after the mission we just had, Naruto said, putting on some regular sandals. Oh, I am going to be. I just came here to get you first. The Hokage has something to tell the entire corps, he said, leading Naruto into the squad room. It's like a living room where some of the individuals in the ANBU could go to just hang out when they don't want to go out in public for reasons no one cares about. They walked in to see the Hokage in the middle of a raised earth wall. It wasn't high, just enough for him to see all of the corps. He noticed Kakashi and Naruto enter the room and began speaking. Now that everyone is here, I have some dire news to tell you all, he said as they all listened to their leader. Naruto and Kakashi walked to the front, but instead of stopping with the others, Kakashi kept going and stood before the Hokage. I must inform you that our beloved member Hatake Kakashi, aka Inu, is retiring from the corps and will become an active elite jounin. It's his choice, so talk to him about it, the Sandaime added after a moment. The others were shocked. Kakashi, the famed Sharingan no Kakashi, was retiring. He was one of the strongest of them all. But the one shocked the most was his team, Yugugo and Naruto. Anko had transferred to the torture and interrogation squad to further learn under Marino Ibiki. They had stayed a 3-man squad since that had happened, and not even a month later, Kakashi decides to retire. Before any of them could voice their disagreements, the Sandaime spoke again. But a stepping down of a captain means that one of the members of Team Omega needs to be promoted to the rank of captain, and the only one that I think has the necessary skill and experience is another Sharingan user. So will Namikaze Uzumaki Uchiha Naruto please step up here to receive your new rank? The Hokage said, smiling down at the young ANBU member. Naruto stood shocked, so much so that the snapping of fingers in his face, courtesy of Yugugo, didn't get him out of his shock. But the clapping of the other members did. He looked around to see his brothers clapping for him, congratulating him on his promotion. A captain was the highest rank you could get without being the commander or the Hokage. Not even the most political assets in the village stood higher than being a captain of an ANBU squad. That was why Naruto was so shocked. He slowly walked up to the makeshift podium and got patted on the back by Kakashi, who did his usual eye smile. Congratulations, Naruto-kun, you deserve it, he said, unsealing his captain cloak out of one of his storage scrolls, giving it to Naruto. It's clean, you don't have to worry about that. I washed it okay, I'm serious, he said, seeing Naruto slightly sniffing it. The others laughed seeing this, and they all began to pat Naruto on his back, and some of the female members gave him a kiss on the cheek. The new blonde-haired Anbu captain was blushing the whole time, feeling embarrassed the whole time. They each turned to the Hokage when he began to speak again. That's not everything I have to say. Now Team Omega is still down a member, so which one of you will like to join this squad? He said, looking at the members, before his eyes landed on Naruto. It's your choice, Naruto-kun, he said. Naruto knew that a three-man squad wasn't a full squad, so the Sandaime must have had a reason to only let him pick one member. He looked around and checked all the members. They all had their masks off to show their faces, but he could still see them on their heads. He searched for minutes before stopping in front of a rather tall and buff individual. I pick you, Kuma. Welcome to Team Omega, he said, shaking the man's hand, and turned to the Hokage. So Hokage-sama, who else is going to be on this squad? I would love to congratulate the person as well, he said, looking at his sensei. Oh, thanks for reminding me, lad, he said, turning his head. You can bring him up now. He spoke to one of his Anbu guards. Soon the sound of somebody getting off the elevator was heard before the person appeared out of the shadowy area. The figure was Uchiha Itachi, and he was going to be the new member of Team Omega after joining the Corps. He didn't change in the past 3 years. He was a little over 11 years old, and he too had a fully matured Sharingan. Everyone could see as it shined and spun in its hypnotizing circle. Itachi-kun here will be joining the Corps. It's a shame everyone knows about it. But he will do well here. Isn't that right, Itachi-kun? He asked the young man. Itachi nodded his head at the Sandaime. Yes, I will, Hokage-sama. I will do my best on Naruto Todo's squad, he said, turning his head back to his little adoptive brother. I knew you were Anbu Todo, that is why I too decided to join, he said, smiling and ruffling his little brother's hair. Naruto struggled under the attack at his hair. Come on, Itachi, you know I don't like when you do that, he said, getting from under the elder Uchiha's hand. The Hokage began to speak yet again. Now can we induct out newest member, or are we going to keep on congratulating little Naruto? Come on everybody, let's give Itachi-kun his equipment, the old man said, jumping off the wall as it crumbled to the ground and disappeared. A half an hour later, Itachi walked out of the last room, dressed in all of his new Anbu armor. It was similar to the others, dark gray. He picked a ninjutsu for his primary weapon and chose a weasel mask, making everyone chuckle since his name meant weasel. He wore his Anbu tattoo proudly as he walked out the room. So what are we going now? Itachi asked out loud as he stood in front of his new team. That's easy. I have an assignment for you four, a voice said as Sarutobi walked by them. I have gotten word that one of our neighboring countries, Nami no Kuni, is being taken over by a tycoon by the name of Gato, the CEO of Gato Incorporations. Well, I just heard that all of that is a front, as he is a drug lord that makes and sells drugs. He is now using his vast resources to drain Nami no Kuni of its money. They spent all of their money to pay for this A-rank assassination mission. I want this to be an in-and-out job, am I clear? He spoke to them, and they saluted the man, yelling, Hi, Hokage-sama, and leaving HQ to start their mission. Naruto donned his new Anbu captain cloak, after properly making sure it was clean. It was a little after 4 o'clock, so many people could see them on top of the eastern gate. You're very lucky, you know that, Itachi, Kitsune said in his full Anbu armor. He was a little annoyed he had just gotten off of a mission, but it wasn't the first time that this has happened. Why do you say that, Kitsune Taicho? Itachi replied as he put on his mask. Kuma answered before his captain could, because from what I know, Taicho's first mission was border patrol, he said, chuckling with the others. Silence, now information, I'll be in the front, Itachi you're in the back, Nico on the right, and Kuma on the left. Even though this is supposed to be an in-and-out job doesn't mean that we can't get ambushed on the way. So Itachi, keep your eyes peeled and keep your senses up. He ordered everyone as they stood at attention and got into formation. Soon they became blurs as they ran through the forest. Seconds turned to minutes and minutes to hours, before they made it to the port village. They ran on the water, using the mist as cover. They appeared inside of the village square, seeing a whole lot of people in front of a cage. They seen a man in there dead. It seems the whole village just witnessed an execution of some poor soul. They each seen a short stout man holding the dripping blade, laughing at the man he had just killed. Let this be an example to those that want to be heroes, he had said as he and his bodyguards hopped on their boat and left. Deciding to let the town mourn for their loss, they jumped from their overlooking position and followed Gato through the mist. And sooner than they had thought, they appeared at the man's base of operations, on a remote island 20 minutes on a boat, away from Nami no Kuni. Kitsune signaled his team to stop, high in the nearest tree. They each crouched up there keeping quiet as they had seen some former ninja turned mercenaries, like one of the former 7 swordsmen of the mist, Momochi Zabuza, talking to Gato. He wanted to get paid for his service as his mercenary. Gato denied him his pay and told him that somebody was trying to build a bridge that will no doubt ruin his plans for the village. They each wanted to attack them right now, but knew that they had to do it when the short man was alone. Kitsune turned to Kuma. "Okay, Kuma, I want you to shadow Zabuza and his protege, and make sure they don't get in the way of the mission. If you must knock him out, we can most likely get some information out of him about Kiri," he told him as the tall man nodded and disappeared. Kitsune then turned to Nico. "Nico, I want you to find a safe way inside of the building. If you must kill a couple of mercenaries to make the area safe, please do so," he told her as she nodded and vanished from her spot. "Wait about me, Taicho?" Itachi asked Kitsune. Kitsune turned to the newest Anbu. "Well, Itachi, we're going to find our own way inside the building," Kitsune said as he used some chakra to his feet and launched himself on top of the building, with Itachi following shortly. He then flared a small amount of his chakra, and Nico appeared in front of them. "Let's go, we're going through the roof," he said, moving to the roof's door, and his finger started to get very hot. They knew this because when he pressed it against the lock it melted off. He opened the door and they ran through the base, and in a show of perfect stealth, did Kitsune pass right by Gato and chop his head off, right after he had opened the door to his vault to check his money. Itachi from behind Kitsune quickly took out a storage scroll, after seeing what was going to happen with his Sharingan, and sealed the head. Nico killed the 2 guards by Gato before they could even realize their leader had been decapitated. Kitsune turned to Nico. "Seal the money. With it the village's financials will raise. Great job, Itachi, that was a nice catch. You'll go places with that kind of quickness," he said as Nico sealed the money in a scroll. After Nico appeared from the doorway, they began to leave the same way they came. Now on the roof, did Kitsune flare his chakra again, and this time Kuma appeared with Zabuza draped over his shoulder and a little boy around the age of 10, hooked under his arms. "Mission accomplished, Kitsune Taicho," Kuma said as they left the base. They ran across the water and soon appeared on land, and now with the mission over they decided to take a little break in the little port town. Naruto pulled out a scroll that had the name of the man that paid for the mission. It was the bridge builder Tazuna, no known surname. It had his address and who was living with him. He was around 55 years old and had a daughter around the age of 25 years old, and she too had a child named Inari around the age of 4. They appeared at the residence and knocked on the door, and the women answered the door and screamed seeing them, thinking they were going to take and kill her next. Katusen spoke. "No need to fear us. Ma'am, we just came to tell you that you don't have to worry about Gato any longer," he spoke, calming the women down. "So you're finally here, but you're too late. Kaiza is dead," she said as Tazuna came walking down the stairs with a bottle of sake in his hand and started to drunkenly comfort his daughter. "Am I to assume that you're the super ninjash that killed the lil bastard?" Tazuna asked drunkenly as he took another gulp from his bottle of sake. The team nodded. "Yes, sir. Like I told your daughter, you don't have to worry about the man anymore. The village will expect further pay for this good deed we did," Kitsune said, nodding his head at Nico as she unsealed the money and it all dropped to the floor. "This is the money that was taken from Wave. Rebuild your village, make your bridge, and come to the village any time in the future if you have any other problems that threatens your country that you yourselves can't handle." Kitsune said as they left the house and began their journey home with their prisoners. An hour and a half later, Team Omega appeared back on the main road of the village. They stopped in front of the gatekeepers, new Chunins Hagane Kotetsu and Kamizuki Izumo. Kitsune and the others showed their Anbu passes and entered the village. Izumo, this may be the easiest job we could have ever gotten, Kotetsu said, slapping the back of his partner. Izumo just agreed with his friend and they shared a big laugh. Izumo then spoke after looking at the Anbu passes. Yeah, it sure is. But don't you ever wonder about the Chunins that had this post a couple of years ago? I heard that they suddenly disappeared one day. It was the talk of the village for a couple of months. And what's even scarier is that their bodies were never found, Izumo said. Team Omega shook their head at the rumor, and Kitsune knew he should go, but he just had to say something. What are you talking about? Sora and Ike retired from their ninja careers due to the madness of being at a village gate for countless years. I wonder how you two will turn out, he asked as he began to chuckle and vanished from his spot, with the rest of his team following. What, that's it? The quit? Maybe they didn't have what it took to watch a gate, huh, Izumo? Kotetsu said, leaning back in his chair, as Izumo hesitantly agreed with his partner, thinking about village gate madness. Hokage Tower. They appeared in the tower, bowing as Kuma put the bodies down and joined in the bowing. Kitsune took his mask off, making it tilt on his head, and spoke. Mission accomplished, Hokage-sama. It was easier than I originally thought it would be, he said, standing up and giving the Sandaime the scroll containing the head of Gato as proof of the kill. Also, Kuma here was so kind to capture some important people. We have here Momochi Zabuza and his student. As you can see, they are knocked out and have been for quite some time now, he said, moving the Hokage's attention to the bodies on the floor by drifting his arm in the direction of the bodies. Good job, Naruto-kun. I knew it was a good idea to support you on being captain of this squad. So how did Itachi-kun do on his first mission? He asked the short squad leader. He did an excellent job on taking orders, and if it was up to me, he'll do an even better job on giving them. In time, of course, he is very advanced in his Sharingan, like any other prodigy would, and he's a seriously quick learner. He takes initiative when he needs to, Naruto said, giving the Hokage a quick report of his adoptive big brother. Sarutobi nodded his head and looked at Itachi as he too took off his mask. So Itachi, how is it taking orders from somebody much younger than yourself? He asked, smiling behind his pipe. Itachi showed a faint smile in that regard. At first, I thought it was going to be annoying, taking orders from my little bro, he said, rubbing Naruto's head again. But it was very different than I had thought it would be. He gave orders like he was born to. He was serious all throughout the whole mission. And when it was over, we went to the house of the man that gave us the mission and returned the money. And Naruto then recommended that the man do what he was going to do, and even come to us if their country was in trouble again. The only word that I could properly describe it would be inspiring, he said, smiling down at the younger Uchiha. The old man smiled at the team again and looked at the other new member. How about you, Kuma? He asked the large, buff man. The man kept his mask on, since Itachi and Naruto were the only ones known as being in the Anbu Corps, not by other villagers but by the council. It was the same as Itachi's, except I knew his reputation in the Corps. He's at the power of Hitaki Kakashi, and he's only going to get stronger. He's not at the level of his father, but in time he'll get there. He might even become the Hokage after the proper teachings and he gains skill in the political world. The unnamed man explained to his leader. The Hokage nodded and looked at Nico, who shook her head. I have nothing to say about taking orders from Naruto-kun, she said. The Hokage nodded and dismissed the team after telling Kuma to take their captures to Ibiki. The whole team then went their separate ways. Naruto and Itachi appeared in front of the Uchiha compound and entered. Soon they walked into the main house and smelled some delicious food being cooked. Motoko appeared from the kitchen hearing the door slide and gasped seeing Itachi in Anbu armor. It was a good thing that Naruto knew how to change quickly, or else he would have been seen in his armor also. Itachi-kun, I thought you were going to join Anbu next week. And where have you been, mister? I don't care if you leave a shadow clone here to keep Sasuke-kun company, But I'm expect the real you here for dinner from now on, you hear me? She said, moving a wooden spoon in front of his face in an angry way. Yes, ma'am, Naruto said, but he was then hit by the spoon. What was that? She asked, as Naruto rubbed his head. Yes, Ka-san, he said. Motoko perked up and hugged the young blonde, like she didn't even hit him with a spoon. That's how I like it. So how was it at the Hokage's house today? Were you nice to his grandson? She asked, letting him go and going back into the kitchen to finish the rice she was cooking. Itachi used this cue to leave, while Naruto went into the kitchen. Yes, I was nice to him, but what else could you do with a child that's only 3 years old? He said, sitting at the table, and then Mikoto began to talk about her day. Naruto was just glad that she didn't know about his other life, but in a corner of his mind he knew that she knew, but didn't want to say anything. Maybe after some time being a captain he could retire to and become a kid and have a childhood just to make her happy. He was still rubbing his head, feel phantom pains of the dreaded wooden spoon. Chapter 6. Talks and Future Problems. The next day, Naruto woke up from his long nap. He yawned, rubbing his belly, sighing at the large meal he had the night before. He got up and took a shower, and got dressed in a pair of black shorts and put on a regular high-collared dark blue shirt. Motoko was putting him in the academy. He complained that he didn't want to go, and almost told her that he was Anbu and didn't need to go to the academy with a bunch of brats. So he had to get up really early. Looking at the clock, he noticed it was 6:34 a.m. Damn, I took too long in the shower. He thought, jumping out the window, being careful not to wake anyone, and being an Anbu with training in stealth, made it easy for him. He appeared on the windowsill of the Hokage's office and opened the window, and searched the desk for the academy enrollment application Motoko sent here. He found it and burned it with a small fire jutsu, and just as the last of the embers disappeared, the Hokage entered the office. Naruto-kun, I thought I felt your chakra signature up here, so do you mind telling me what you're doing up here? He said, sniffing the air, a little smelling burnt cinders. What did you burn? He said, crossing his arms. Naruto lowered his head. Motoko Ka-san is thinking of enrolling me into the academy, and what I burned was the application for it, he said, telling the truth. The Hokage thought about this. Well, good, but you could have just come to me and told me of this. Now she's going to be suspicious of how come you didn't get into the academy, he said, thinking more. Hey Naruto-kun, do you want your position in Anbu to go completely public, like Itachi-kun's and Kakashi-kun's were? The village would become more feared knowing of your identity and the power you withhold? The Hokage asked his young charge. Naruto looked puzzled at the Hokage. You want to use me to make the village feared? I don't know. I would like to stay in the shadows where I do my best, he said, declining the offer of publicity. The Hokage shook his head, chuckling to himself. Oops, he said, digging into his robe. Naruto froze. Oops, what do you mean by that, old man? He said as his Sharingan came to life, as Ki flooded the room. That's when Naruto heard a voice. Isn't it obvious, Ningen? The man already went against your wishes, before you even knew, the demonic voice said, shocking Naruto as he had never heard the voice before. I'm sorry, Naruto-kun, but you're already in the next issue of the bingo book. It's already shipping out to all the foreign countries and some of your information is in there, he said, taking out a bingo book and throwing it to the young boy. You're on page 53 and 54, right between Itachi and Kakashi. Naruto turned to the page and looked at what was on it. Name: Namikaze Uzumaki Uchiha Naruto aka Shur no Kage, Shadow of Death. Age 9. Eye color: blue-gray. Hair color: blonde. Rank: ANBU Captain, Kitsune Mask. Affinities: wind, water, earth, are primary with fire and lightning being secondary. Trained by the Sandaime of Konoha, Green Beast of Konoha, and the Genjutsu Mistress of Konoha. Mother: Uzumaki Kushina aka No Sure, Red Death. Father: Namikaze Minato aka Kiroi no Senku, Yellow Flash. Class: SS Class. Skills: in all categories, very high ninjutsu, genjutsu, and taijutsu. Bloodline Sharingan. High Chakra Reserves and Container of the Kyubi no Kitsune. This condition has issued the village to add another S to the class. Naruto looked at the Hokage like he was crazy, his Sharingan spinning like crazy. "Why the hell did you put all of this in here?" he yelled, wanting an answer immediately. The Hokage looked sternly at the young boy. "Don't forget just who you're talking about, Naruto. I did what I did for the village, now we are much stronger and more feared with you public," he said, calming down at the end. "Not to mention, you were only put into ANBU for protection until you got strong enough to protect yourself, which you can do fine. Now leave my office, I got work to do," he said, dismissing Naruto with a wave of his hand, which Naruto had nothing to do except apologize to his leader, while bowing and leaving the office in a body flicker. Not even a second after appearing from his body flicker to the roof of a nearby building did he hear the voice again. "You're just going to take that from that old fossil?" the voice asked in mild discontent. Deep down, Naruto knew this was the Kyubi, and decided to be respectful to the giant kitsune in his mind. After all, it is the king of all demons speaking to him. I have to, he's the leader of the village. Naruto thought simply. And yet, you're stronger than him, he did too good of a job training you. And plus I have the feeling that something is going to happen in the future, and when the time comes you need to make a decision to either stay here, where you're hated in public and respected in the shadows, or leave and you'll be feared by all. Think about the choice, kit," the Kyubi said cryptically as it returned to the depths of Naruto's mind. Naruto stood on the roof for another 5 minutes just thinking about what the Kyubi said, before he shook his head and jumped towards Anko's apartment to see how she was doing, as he haven't seen her in quite some time. He appeared in front of the door and knew not to knock as it was a little too early in the morning and she will get cranky if he woke her up. So he picked the lock as melting it would be bad, and silently entered the apartment and looked around. The apartment was a little boring if you asked him. It only contained a couch and little table, and a television, no pictures on the wall and no decorations anywhere. He heard light snoring coming from the single bedroom and quietly entered and seen one of the purple-haired goddesses in the village, sprawled out in her bed, the blankets barely covering her body. Her hair was out of its usual ponytail and it was longer than he had imagined. It looked like it could reach her shoulder blades. He looked around her room and seen a couple of picture frames with pics of her, Yugugo Korinai, and another girl he hasn't seen before. She looked about 16 years old. She had brown hair and big red fang-like marks on her cheeks, showing that she was an Inuzuka. She had a moderate-sized bust, maybe a small C-cup, and nice cute light brown eyes. This picture was taken recently. He noticed Anko and the others looked the same as they do now, so maybe a couple of weeks ago. The main thought in his mind was, why wasn't he invited to take the picture with them? Or was this girl's night out? Whatever it was, he didn't care. All he cared about was meeting this new chick. The real thought was, why didn't he know this girl? He was an ANBU dam and he should know about everyone in the village, until it came to him. He snapped his fingers and silently watched Anko turn over and make a cute sound as she did. But back at the topic at hand, the girl was Inuzuka Hana, daughter of the clan head, Sum. "I love being an ANBU," he thought as he turned around. He walked to the door and exited the room, closing the door silently as he did, for what he was about to do would most likely wake her up. A little after 8:00 a.m. Anko finally woke up and opened her door. When the scent of some delicious breakfast invaded her senses, she got into shinobi mode, knowing that not only did she not have a roommate but someone was still in her apartment. She grabbed a kunai from only Kami knows where and stalked through her house, and entered the kitchen throwing her kunai as she did. She didn't expect for it to bounce off of a swirling ball of wind that was surrounding the intruder, and the only people she knew that knew how to use wind was Naruto and Asuma, and the latter was still at the capital. She barely just noticed that the intruder was Naruto. She rubbed the sleepiness out of her eyes and looked closer at the invader, and seen his spiky blonde hair. Now, Anko-chan, that is no way to treat someone who just cooked us breakfast," Naruto said, hopping down from nothing. She scoffed. "Yeah, well, Gaki, nobody told you to cook this delicious smelling meal." She speaking slower as she smelled the food on her kitchen table. Her stomach growled and she blushed slightly as she rubbed the back of her head. Sorry, I haven't had anything to eat since you brought in that missing Nin, Zabuza. He hasn't even talked since we got him. Not even Ibiki can make him utter a single sound. I even told him I was going to cut his balls off if he didn't say anything," she said, not seeing Naruto shiver in slight fear. "He sat at the table with the rest of the food. And did he talk?" Naruto said, dividing the food up equally and sitting down. "He just cooked an omelet that had some ham and herbs in there with a side of hash browns and bacon." She nodded, after saying, "Itadakamasu with Naruto." "Yeah," he said, "don't cut my balls off and that he needed them," she said as they both laughed. "Now that I think about how exactly did you capture someone like Zabuza in the first place?" she said, taking a bite of her omelet. Naruto stopped mid-bite. I never even asked Kuma how he did it," he thought as he looked at Anko and shrugged his shoulders. "Maybe we should ask him later?" Naruto suggested after finishing his meal, and Anko agreed as she too finished her meal. "That was a great breakfast. Thank you, Naruto-kun," Anko said, giving him a peck on the cheek, watching Naruto blush and rub the back of his head in embarrassment. "So how about we go to HQ now and get the questioning over with?" she asked, walking to her room to change into her regular clothes, since all she was wearing was a pair of bra and panties over a robe. "That's good," Naruto said, and as soon as the door to her room closed, blood started to finally come out of his nose and his head collapsed on the table, as he had seen more than he should have, and used the Sharingan to memorize it. Good thing she hadn't noticed. She came out minutes later after he picked his head up from the table and cleaned up the blood from his nose, and they left for the ANBU HQ. On the way, Naruto turned to Anko. "Hey Anko, did you get the new bingo book?" he asked out of the blue. She shook her head negative. "No, why did it update?" she asked with Naruto nodded, and reaching into his pocket and throwing the one he got from the Hokage. She caught it mid-jump and skimmed through it. She stopped, completely forcing Naruto to stop too. Naruto-kun, what are you doing in the bingo book? And why is there so much information? You know, now that I think about it, all of the people that enter the ANBU and have the Sharingan find their way onto the bingo book, it's weird," she said, shrugging her shoulders, not caring anymore, for what was done, meaning it couldn't be reversed, so you might as well adapt to it. Naruto caught the book and they continued their journey. "The Hokage put me in here, saying that, now that I'm stronger, I should get out of the shadows and stop hiding, which I understand, but I've been in the shadow for the past 4 or 5 years now. I like not being glared at by the populace every time I'm on break and journey into the village," Naruto said, just rambling the more he went on. Anko turned to him and said, "Huh, what did you say? I wasn't listening," she said, laughing, knowing that he knew where she got it from. Naruto joined in the laughter as they did a quick body flicker to appeared on the other side of the wall and went straight to ANBU HQ. They entered after being checked and saying hello to some of the members they knew and headed for the part of the building that held the prisoners, where they went through the maze-like corridor and opened a door and stepped into a hallway that held the holding cells. They passed by many dangerous criminals that were either there for life or waiting for a private execution. They opened the door on the end of the hallway and entered a less dangerous criminal area. These were just people that were only here for a predetermined amount of time, and those either getting ready for being interrogated or was sent back here because they didn't crack. They walked to the guard guarding the cell and asked him if they could talk to the prisoner. The ANBU nodded and walked away, after unlocking the door for them to enter. And enter they did. It was safe as Zabuza's hands were tied to the wall, and the handcuffs had a chakra draining seal etched onto them, and not to mention the strength of the cuffs themselves, so they wouldn't be in any kind of trouble. Currently, Zabuza was meditating with his hands behind his back and sitting in the most comfortable position he could be in. "Zabuza, we need to talk to you," Naruto said, sitting down in front of the demon of the mist. Naruto began to study the man since he didn't respond to his statement. He noticed the man was in a very deep concentration. "I noticed you seem to be reinforcing your mind to prepare yourself for when Inoichi-san comes to take a look at your mind, to gather information about your country and anything else he feels like looking at," Naruto said, seeing a slight twitch in the left eye of the man. He had been removed of his weapons, obviously, and his original clothing. He was now wearing a simple gray full-body jumpsuit, and simple cloth wrapped around his feet. And now that Naruto thought about it, he had come in with somebody. "Say, where is that one kid we brought in with him?" Naruto asked Anko, not turning away from the man, and he was guaranteed a more noticeable twitch from the man, who then opened his eyes. "Where is Haku?" he asked simply with fire burning in his brown eyes, looking straight into Naruto's own blue-gray ones. Naruto wagged his finger in front of the man's face. I'm the one that's going to answer the questions, but if it'll help you cooperate, then I'll tell you, are you going to cooperate with me? Naruto asked, stopping his finger wagging and looking straight into the older man's eyes, just as he was doing to him. He could have used the Sharingan to make him cooperate, but where was the fun in that? They continued to stare into each other's eyes before Zabuza lowered his eye level and nodded to the boy, hating that he had to do it, but he just had to know where the boy was. Naruto gave a small smile and spoke to Anko. "Anko, tell the man where the boy is. I imagine that he'll be pleased," he said, standing up from his crouch and shook his legs to get rid of the aches and pains. Anko also smiled. "The kid is in a way better, more furnished jail cell. We felt that since he was only a kid, he should be put into a more livable area. You're lucky that Naruto-kun here discourages using pain to get information, or I might just have chopped your balls off," she said, laughing at the end, making the two males in the room shiver at the statement. Naruto pushed the thought out of his mind and crouched back in front of Zabuza. "Now let's get this started with, first question. How exactly did Kuma capture you yesterday?" Naruto said with curiosity in his voice. Zabuza got a little annoyed at hearing the question. "Well, at first, I walked away from Gato and felt the slight use of a body flickered, and immediately knew someone was shadowing me and my charge. I was then trying to lead the follower into an open area where I could properly deal with it, but I felt another pulse of chakra, and the man appeared in front of me with Haku under his arms, and threatened that I come with him or else he'll kill Haku. When Naruto heard that, he grew angry with the muscled man at the tactic he used. It sounded a little like how root ninjas would perform, and if the man was on his team, he must have been ordered to watch either him, Itachi, or both of them by their leader Danzu. He didn't have time to tell the man to continue, as he did a second later. After hearing that, I struggled for a solution on what to do, until I gave myself up, as the Anbu did have a kunai on Haku's neck. After giving up, I watched him put his kunai away, and lunged for Haku, but an earth clone appeared from under me, grabbing my foot before I could fully get off the ground. I tripped and fell on the floor and was then knocked out with a chop to my neck, and next thing I know, I'm waking up here," Zabuza said, finishing his story, reluctant to tell them that he fell on the floor. Naruto heard laughter in his head, and knew that the Kyuubi was rolling on the floor laughing loudly because his head was starting to hurt. "Shut up, please. I can't concentrate," Naruto thought, adding the please when it suddenly got quiet. A chuckle was then heard after. "It was wise of you to say please, Ningen." Naruto shook his head and turned to Anko. "Go get Ibiki and get him to handle the rest of the interrogation. I'm going to gather my team for some team sparring. You want to watch?" he asked as they walked out of the cell. The Anbu near them saluted and locked the door and stood in front of it again. Anko nodded, and they went separate ways to gather the team, with Naruto telling Anko to meet them at Training Ground 43. Since Naruto was already in HQ, he searched for Kuma, and found him in the Anbu's personal training ground. "Kuma, gather your equipment and meet me at Training Ground 43. He said, simply, not seeing Kuma nod as he turned around and body flickered out of HQ. Knowing that Anko was getting Yugugo, he went back into the Uchiha compound and checked the sun for a quick time estimate. It looked around noon. He looked around and noticed people looking at him and wishing him a good afternoon. He noticed something though. Not many people were in the streets, only kids and some old people. He shrugged his shoulders, thinking it wasn't his problem, and body flickered to the main house, where he lived. He entered just as Fugaku was leaving, and they ran into each other with him falling on his butt. "Ow," the blonde said, rubbing his butt. The older man slightly glared down at him and fixed his formal kimono. The glare became more cold at noticing Naruto's blonde hair. "Get up, boy, you're in my way," he said as Naruto picked himself up and stepped out of the man's way, his Sharingan activated as he glared at the man's back. He entered the house to see Itachi's back as he walked down the hallway to his room. He could feel the anger rolling off of his body, so he followed. He peeked his head in Itachi's room. "Itachi, what happened with your father?" Back there? Naruto asked, not wanting to be in the dark. Itachi looked at his captain. Well, after breakfast, he talked to me in private, telling me that the clan was going to have a meeting, and I told him that I didn't want to go. I thought that it ended right there, but after Mother and Sasuke left to get some more groceries, he talked to me again, telling me the plan he was thinking of. He's planning to take the village over and assume his place as the Hokage. I strongly disagreed with him and told him that he'll only get himself killed. He then explained to me that it wouldn't happen if I was to become a spy and give up the weaknesses of the Hokage Tower and the Sandame's living quarters to assassinate the Hokage. Itachi said in anger as he began dressing in his Anbu armor, as he wanted to get a mission to calm down. Naruto shook his head and stared at the roof. And I expect that you declined that offer as well, Naruto said, looking briefly at Itachi, seeing him nod his head. So what are you going to do? Naruto asked his subordinate. I'm going to report it to the Hokage and follow whatever order he gives me, he said, strapping on his boots and standing up, and after opening his window jumped out, with Naruto following. Naruto turned to the older Uchiha. Itachi, do that later. Now we're going to training ground 43 for an exercise I have brewing up in my noggin, Naruto said as he jumped off course to where he knew training ground 43 was. Itachi stopped on the next roof and stared at the Hokage Tower in the distance and glanced behind him and looked at the retreating form of Naruto. He sighed as he turned around and followed his captain. Chapter 7, Exercises and Meetings. Clearing in Training Ground 43. Naruto was leaning against a giant boulder, with his hands behind his head, by the time Itachi jumped into the clearing. It was minutes after him that Yugugo and Anko appeared, and then it was Kuma who appeared. Kuma wasn't wearing his mask and it showed a man's face. He had a mustache and beard combo, making a goatee. He had dull, emotionless brown eyes that were common in Root, and short brown hair. They gathered to him and waited for what he had to say. Naruto continued looking at the sky as he spoke. As you all most likely know, my identity in Anbu has been recently exposed by the Hokage, and after some time thinking about it, I came to understand why he did it. Naruto began his speech as his team and Anko listened on quietly. Naruto shoved himself off the rock and looked around. I now believe that he is making the village more feared than what is used to be before the unveiling. Anko has already seen my page in the bingo book. Now I am to believe that you have seen it by now, he asked, looking at his team, watching them nod their heads. I seen it when Anko came to my apartment, Yugugo said, crossing her arms. Naruto nodded his head. Good, now today I have a little exercise planned for the evening. It's going to be a 2-on-2 fight, with the teams switching up every now and again. That part will be played by Anko, who will call out 2 numbers of whoever she wants on a team, Naruto said, handing out some numbered papers. The rules are simple, no weapons and only taijutsu. Naruto had 1, Yugugo had 2, Itachi 3, and Kuma 4. After everyone had their numbers and stepped away from each other, Anko called out 2 numbers, 1 and 2, she said loudly as Naruto and Yugugo dashed towards Itachi and Kuma. They split apart and rushed after their separate targets. Naruto reached Kuma and sent a punch at his chest. Kuma quickly sidestepped it and grabbed the arm and threw Naruto into the air. While in the air, Naruto threw down a smoke pellet that exploded outwards and a heavy smoke covered the area. He landed just in time to see Kuma jump out of the heavy fog and try to kick him in the side. Without using the Sharingan, he predicted that this would happen and was already in the motion for a jump. As the leg passed under him, he used it as leverage as he sent a kick of his own at Kuma. The kick connected as Kuma was sent flying backwards. With Yugugo, she sent a punch at Itachi, who dropped to the ground to dodge it and went for a leg sweep. The purple-haired woman slightly jumped over it and sent a kick at Itachi as she did it. Itachi barely tilted his head back enough for the kick to safely pass his head. While in the motion of going backward, he rolled and sprung in the air and landed on his feet, just in time to grab the punch thrown by Yugugo. He then threw her over his shoulders, and she was sent flying in the air. Anko then called out, 2 and 3, so Yugugo, while in the air, turned around, and when she landed on the floor, sent a punch at Naruto, who had just kicked Kuma away. Naruto's danger senses went off and jumped away from the punch. "Nice dodge, Naruto-kun," she said as she ran to Naruto. Naruto nodded and dodged another punch and a kick before he sent his own. It missed the middle of her midsection, but connected with the side of it. Yugugo used the spin the punch caused and roundhouse kicked Naruto in the side of his shoulders. Naruto was sent skidding on his feet for a couple of feet, before he stopped and rushed toward the Anbu female. With Itachi, after throwing Yugugo, he heard the numbers being called and rushed to the flying Kuma. While Kuma was rolling on the ground, he jumped in the air and sent an axe kick at the brown-haired man. Kuma stopped himself from rolling, just in time to put up his arms to block Itachi's axe kick. He didn't push him off like some people would. Instead, he quickly grabbed the ankle of the eldest Uchiha and slammed him to the floor beside him. He then got up and threw him across the field. Itachi groaned after being slammed into the ground, and while in the air, he activated his Sharingan. So when Kuma came after him, it was a piece of cake to counter and dodge his attacks. He sent a couple of his own, and soon Kuma was gasping for air after getting hit in the throat, but he didn't have time to even do that as Itachi spun and sent a roundhouse kick to the man's head, sending him across the field. After the kick connected, Anko called out, "1 and 2. Again, making Itachi curse under his breath after kicking the man. And with Naruto and Yugugo, he skidded to a stop right in front of her, after faintly hearing the numbers. He had almost crashed into the purple-haired Anbu, but she moved out of the way and grabbed his arm, stopping him from going any further. They then dashed toward the others. This time Naruto went after Itachi and activated his Sharingan, seeing Itachi's own red eyes. This was something you would want to see, as none of the hits these two warriors were throwing hit their designated target. Then something intriguing happened. Naruto connected a hit on the elder Uchiha. Itachi flew back and groaned a little as he rubbed his sore cheek. "How'd you do that?" he asked, getting up and noticing Naruto didn't have his Sharingan activated. And even though he was moving, Itachi couldn't predict where he was going to be next. Naruto smirked as he could obviously hear the curiousness in Itachi's calm voice. "It's a technique I created to counter the predicting abilities of the Sharingan. I'm not going in detail, but basically I halted my chakra from going where I was going to go next. I know it's a little difficult to understand, but don't you think I wouldn't know the weakness of my own bloodline?" he said, seeing the small indentation of a raised eyebrow from the dark-haired Uchiha. He smirked again as he spoke again. "All right, let's bring out the ninjutsu," he said loud enough for everyone to hear. "Now it's going to be everyone for themselves," he said as his hands blurred through hand seals, shocking Itachi at its speed. "Suetun, Ja no Kuchi, serpent mouth," he said as he spit out a snake from his mouth, and it sped towards Itachi, weaving through the air as it did. Itachi wasn't being idle, as he was also doing hand seals. He said, "Doton, Doryu Heki, earth wall." He crouched to the ground and slammed his hands on the ground, and a wall of earth rose in the air, stopping the serpent from doing any damage to him. And then the battle of elements started with the two Uchiha experts. With Yugugo, she dashed forward, but her punch was blocked by the recovering Kuma. She was then raised in the air, but before the man could slam her back on the floor, she kicked him under his chin. As he let go of her, she dropped onto the floor and spun on her hand, using her feet to kick his feet from under him. The man became a little agitated at always being put on the floor and quickly rolling back onto his feet and kicked Yugugo in the stomach while she was getting up. Yugugo was a little surprised at the speed Kuma was going, and she was, again, surprised when he appeared by her and punched her to the ground. The short 2 feet fall did more damage she would have thought. And then he threw another punch at her. She rolled out of the way just in time to dodge the heavy punch. They both then heard Naruto tell them they could now use ninjutsu in the fight. So while she was getting up, she was doing hand seals. "Raitun, Inazuma Ken, lightning fist," she said as she dashed towards the brown-haired man with lightning around her fist. Kuma was doing some hand seals also, but the speed Yugugo was going surprised him a little, and he didn't have time to finish them unless he didn't want to have a head anymore. He ducked backwards and only received a slight shock from the passing lightning. He quickly jumped away from the female and did a hand seal. "Doton, Doryu Taiga," Earth Flow River, he said as the dashing Yugogo slipped on the mud and was being carried by the strong current of the mud. In the trees, away from the fighting, was Anko. She was a little excited with the fighting, but got bored when her job no longer existed. But getting an idea, she dropped to the ground from her branch and did some hand seals. Doton, Iwa Hebe, rocky snakes, she said as dozens of snakes crashed out of the ground and slithered toward the others. She grinned as she joined in the fight. Naruto just dodged a fireball from his fellow Uchiha and was about to send one of his own when half a dozen snakes appeared in front of him and tried to bite him. So instead of the fireball going to Itachi, it hit the face of the nearest snake, so the resulting explosion sent him flying away, with a couple burns marring his shorts. He looked around and dodged the bite from another snake. He growled as lightning covered his body, before it covered his hands and feet. So the nearest snake was kicked and the exploding shrapnel damaged another snake as his enhanced speed allowed him to dodge it. Soon the remaining 4 snakes were destroyed, but a new challenger emerged as Anko appeared in front of him. "I see you destroyed my pets. Now I want an apology?" she said, crossing her arms with a smirk on her face. Naruto lightly gaped at her. "You're serious?" he said in disbelief, and after seeing her nod her head, he shook his. "I'm sorry, I can't do that. You ruined my training exercise," he said, dashing forward as he fought his new opponent. With Itachi, after firing his fireball at Naruto, and seeing him dodge it, a half a dozen snakes appeared around him. And one of them coiled itself around his body, but the body then exploded, destroy that snake and 2 of the other snakes around it. He appeared again, and with only 3 more snake to fight, he did some hand seals. Katon, Ryu Adamien, Flaming Dragon Head, he said as a large dragon head flew out of his mouth and quickly destroyed a snake. And as the remaining 2 slithered to him, he some more hand seals. Katon, Zukaku, Head Mincing Pain, he said as he blew out a huge column of fire that destroyed the other 2 snakes when it exploded after contact with them. He looked around and spotted Naruto fighting Anko, so he decided to fight with Yugogo and Kuma. After Yugogo dodged a huge dango of earth, she launched a beam of lighting at the unsuspecting snake that appeared in front of her. Though the beam kept going and hit Kuma in the leg after he destroyed his own snake. He was lucky that it only brushed against the side of it and not through it, or he wouldn't be able to use the leg for a long time. He winced as the beam passed by. He then started doing some hand seals when his 5 remaining snakes surrounded him. Doton, Ishi no Yoroi, Stone Armor, he said as his body was then covered in hardened rocks that were surrounding him. He punched the nearest rock and destroyed it easily with his enhanced strength. Yugogo appeared behind him and kicked the snake that was about to make him its next meal. "Watch yourself, Chero. These snakes mean business," she said, firing another beam at another snake. The newly named Chero nodded his head and did a hand seal. "Doton, Ishi Kazui, Stone Spikes," he said, and destroyed 3 of the remaining 4 snakes. He then dashed forward and punched the last snake in its rocky head, destroying it. He turned around to see Yugogo destroy her last snake with another one of her lightning beams. It was then that Itachi appeared near them. "Anko is fighting Naruto Taicho. Let's go watch," he said as they all disappeared and went to watch the fight between Naruto and Anko. Naruto dodged another high-speed strike from the purple-haired goddess. Snakes burst from her sleeve and gathered around him, trying to constrict around his body. But his body went poof in a cloud of smoke. Naruto didn't want to use any dangerous jutsus, so he did a hand seal. "Suetun, Mizurappa, Violent Water Wave," he said as he blew out a stream of water. He cursed himself when he seen Anko jump over it and send more snakes at him. He charged a Rasengan in his hand and destroyed the attacking snakes. He did more hand seals when Anko landed and slammed his hands on the ground. "Doton, Otoshi Buta, Covering Lid," he said as an oversized lid fell on Anko and covered her. This gave Naruto time to take a deep breath before Anko tried to pull him into the ground with her headhunter technique. Thankfully, he jumped away in time. He ended his jutsu and watched the giant lid disappear in a puff of smoke. He decided to end the little spar they were having as he vanished from his spot, making Anko frown. Naruto appeared behind her. "Don't frown," he whispered in her ear, as he pressed a pressure point in her neck, making her body fall into his arms. He didn't have time to take a breath before the body in his arms disappeared, showing a piece of wood in its place. He groaned when he seen this, and looked at the smirking Anko from across the clearing. "All right, she wants to play like that, then let's play," he muttered as he quickly did some hand signs. "Katan? Yo no ukami? Wolves of burning embers," he muttered as he blew out a dozen of little fireballs at the ground in front of him. And like the name suggests, wolves made of fire emerged from the embers. There was 10 wolves in total. Anko smirked and brought back her rocky snakes, and when the two hordes of creatures met in the middle, a massive explosion rocked the clearing, and a crater of a couple of meters wide and a half a meter deep was left in the middle. The others' eyes widened as, not only haven't they seen this jutsu, but they were surprised at the magnitude of the explosion. The fight had ended as soon as Anko witnessed the crater, as she whistled to show her surprise of the jutsu. "Geez, Naruto-kun, what if that would have hurt me? Now I really want my apology," she said, walking over to him, as the others joined in. Naruto's response was cut off when he seen a hawk diving down towards him. It flapped its wings and landed on his outstretched arm. Naruto took the scroll from around its leg, and the hawk squawked loudly, making Naruto's ears hurt because of the proximity of the sound. Itachi unsealed a small piece of jerky from his scroll and gave it to the bird, and they all watched it fly away, its mission now complete. "What does the scroll say, Naruto-kun?" Anko asked, looking at the Hokage's seal on the scroll. Naruto opened the scroll, looked it over, and burned it when he was finished. "So are you going to tell us or not?" Anko said with her hands on her hips. "The council just wants to see me about the bingo book and my position in Anbu," he said as he began to walk away. He soon vanished in a tornado body flicker. It was only a matter of time before the council called Taicho in, Chero said as he rubbed his head. Itachi showed a slight frown when he heard the comment, because now his little brother was going to be in a room with a bunch of power-hungry old people that will most likely try to control him in some way. He shook his head and looked at the sun in the sky to check the time. Well, according to the sun, it was around 3 in the afternoon. He sighed because around this time his other brother, Sasuke, would come home from school and ask for training. The kid just turned 8 a couple of weeks ago, and since then he has been asking for training non-stop. It was getting on his nerves. "You all right, Itachi?" Yugogo said as they all glanced at him. He just shook his head and started walk home. Yugogo shrugged her shoulders and went home to take another shower. Kuma went to go train by himself until his team gets a mission, and the only person left was Anko, who started walking to the mission hall to see if she could get a mission. But on her way she cursed herself as she realized that Naruto didn't apologize to her. With Naruto walked into the room and stood on the right side of the Hokage. "Now that Naruto-kun is here, this meeting can begin," the Sandaime said. Naruto looked around the room as everyone looked at him and muttered words to their neighbors. He yawned to show how he felt about the meeting so far. One of the elders stood. It was the woman. "Hokage-sama, can you tell us, why weren't we informed about Uzumaki's position in the Anbu, nor of his skills until this morning?" Koharu asked, starting off the questioning. Before the Hokage could answer, Naruto did. "I don't think that's any of your business, as the Anbu core members are supposed to be kept secret and only exposed when the village needs a morale boost. If my identity was revealed at an earlier time, then it wouldn't have worked as good as it did at the present time. And plus the council, not even the shinobi side, needs to know the roster for the Anbu core. Trust me, I'm very updated in the rules of the village," he explained, picking at his ears when the noise started escalating. "You insolent whelp, it would be wise not to anger the council, as we have more power than you can imagine," Danzo said, another elder of the village, as he too stood to his feet. A louder voice made itself known. "Yeah, you brat. You're lucky we don't have you hanged for your disrespect," Sukumi said in disgust at the demon Uchiha, still not believing that he was the son of the Yondaime. Naruto slightly glared at the women before relaxing. "If I am correct to believe, but isn't this a matter dealing with a shinobi of the village, you have no business in here, civilian. I would like to have you leave with the rest of the civilian council," he said, looking at the Hokage, who nodded, and Anbu escorted the civilians out of the room. albeit they were yelling their heads off at the demon kicking them out of the room. The shinobi council smirked at the backs of the civilians as the elders frowned at seeing their support leave the room, because with them gone they couldn't accomplish anything. Damn that little brat and his knowledge of the village's rules and regulations. Fugaka spoke up. Uzumaki, how long have you been in the ANBU? He said, looking into Naruto's eyes with his Sharingan activated to see if the child was lying. Everyone's eyes were on the child, who glanced at the Hokage for a second, seeing him nod his head. I've been in the ANBU since I was 6 years old, so almost 4 years, he said, answering truthfully, not seeing any reason to lie to them. Fugaka nodded his head, having a feeling he would say that. Inoichi spoke up. How are you doing mentally? Are you suffering from any mental traumas or anything? He asked, knowing how dangerous the ANBU core was to a person's mind. Naruto shook his head in the negative. No, nothing is wrong with my mind, he said with his head leaning on his hand in boredom. The meeting progressed for another hour with useless questions being asked to the blonde. Ironically, the elders kept quiet and let the others ask the questions. After it ended, Naruto walked out of the room, with Fugaku by his side as they both walked to the Uchiha compound. Fugaku looked at the bored ANBU captain and got a plan. Hey Naruto, you like power, right? He said, looking at the young Uchiha. Naruto mentally shook his head, already knowing what he wanted to ask him, but decided to play along anyway. Yeah, I do. Why do you have any? He asked, looking at the clan head. Fugaku ignored the jab at his strength. Yes, I do. And you could have some if you help me, but I'll only tell you if you help me. Do we have a deal? The clan head said, keeping things as vague as he could. As long as I get stronger, I don't care what I have to do, Naruto said with faked enthusiasm. Fugaku gave a dark smirk as he put his hand on Naruto's shoulder. With Naruto on my side, I'll become Hokage in no time, he thought sinisterly as they entered the compound. Chapter 8 Massacre. A year and a couple of months later. Naruto is now 11 years old, and he's walking to Itachi's room. It's around 2 o'clock in the morning and the rest of the household were sleeping. He's not going to Itachi's room because of an ANBU mission. No, their team has a week off. It's about what he talked about with Fugaku a couple of hours back with the ninja of the Uchiha clan. He silently opens the door and peeks his head into the room. He silently walked to Itachi's bed and stood over him. Itachi, he whispered, and the eldest Uchiha's eyes shot open at hearing his name. His dark eyes bled to his Sharingan and then to his Manjikyu Sharingan he gained after Shursui was sent to spy on him and he was forced to kill him. The first time he awakened it, he went straight to Naruto, who he thought already had it, but it was news to Naruto as he had never heard about it until that point in time. This forced Naruto to meditate and confront the Kyuubi about the subject, and all the giant fox did was laugh in his face. He still remembers that day. Flashback 4 months ago. Why are you laughing? All I asked was what the Manjikyu Sharingan was? Naruto asked in annoyance at the kitsune's response toward his question. The noise the fox was making his ears hurt, and it just continued until Naruto used his power over his own mind to make the cage much smaller than it was supposed to be, stopping the fox's laughter and making it a little uncomfortable. All right, Ninjen, I'll tell you, just make the cage bigger or I'll eat you alive. The fox half pleaded and half threatened. Naruto thought for a moment and then made the cage larger since the fox still hasn't told him what he wants to know. All right, fox, now can you answer my question, please? The blonde said, sitting on the damp floor. Kyuubi shook a little, getting feeling back into his body, and let his tails move across the floor behind him, finding a comfortable spot for them, and then he laid down and glared the sitting human. Don't ever do that again. Now the Manjikyu Sharingan is an upgrade of the regular Sharingan. The user gains special abilities after activating these special eyes. A way to get the Manjikyu is to train your eyes beyond normal limits, and even more beyond than that. Another way is to kill your best friend, in which the depression felt for committing such an act will somehow transform your eyes. I still don't understand that part, and I still don't. Are you following me? Kyuubi said, getting out of his lecture mode when he looked at the blonde Anbu, seeing him staring at the ceiling above him. Naruto looked at the Kyuubi for a brief second before looking back at the ceiling. Yeah, I was listening, I was just thinking about something, Naruto said, asking for the Kyuubi to continue with his lecture. The giant kitsune growled at the lack of attention but let it slide since he knew that the boy was truly paying attention. Alright, the abilities of the eyes are unique to only the eyes. In the left eye of the Manjikyu is the most unique genjutsu known to you humans. It's the Tsukiyomi or goddess of the moon. When using this technique, the caster can put the victim in a genjutsu that is both mentally and physically harmful, and they will be in the illusion for a minimum of 24 hours or a maximum of 72 hours. In the world of Tsukiyomi, you are kami and can torture your victim in any way you can imagine, so it kind of helps to have a vivid imagination. The kitsune said, chuckling at the things he would be doing on mostly everyone he does the technique on. Now the right eye of the Manjikyu are the most dangerous flames in the all realms, Amaterasu or goddess of the sun. When using this ninjutsu, you can burn anything and everything you literally set your eyes on. These flames can never be extinguished by water techniques and will keep burning for 7 days and 7 nights. The only weakness of the Amaterasu is that the flames can be sealed if the sealer knew how. But without the sealing, the flames will continue to burn unless either you stop them or after 7 days and nights passes, so you can literally burn a village down, and they won't be able to stop it. Kyubi lectured, his tails waving behind him as if in a trance, and his eyes were glazed over thinking about burning the village down and sleeping in its ashes. Now, when using both of the eyes of the Manjikyu, you summon the most powerful defense of all time, the Susanoo or the god of sea and storms. This defense can even become your offense, but the sort of offense is different with every user, and only Uchiha Madara, Uchiha Izuna, and now Uchiha Itachi have ever activated the Manjikyu, and I haven't seen their Susanoo. The fox continued to lecture, bearing now mind to Naruto, who continued to think on his newfound knowledge. Naruto looked at the Kyubi. So is that it about the Manjikyu? He said, scratching his head, and began to stand up. No, it isn't all. Matter of fact, I've only just begun. The Kyubi said, smirking as Naruto sat back on the floor. The Kyubi then told him about another technique called Kamui that can send somebody to another dimension and can even send you to another dimension. The technique can allow jutsu and even people to pass through them, but it had a weakness, and if you studied the workings of the technique for a long time, then you will find the weakness. Another technique was one that was banned by the Uchiha, and that was Izanagi. It's a genjutsu that grants the user the abilities to make wounds and disadvantages into nothing but a dream. This has a very, very, very dangerous after effect though, and that was the cost of your sight of the eye you used to cast it, and that was why it was banned. You don't exactly need the Manjikyu to use it. Now that is all about the Manjikyu. Now remember, when one activates the Manjikyu, their sight will begin to fade, and a disease will spread through the body every time the person uses it. When you learn to activate yours, that will not be a problem, since I completely terminated that part of the eye's DNA strand. He said, looking at the slightly shocked Naruto. So every time Itachi uses one of those techniques, his eyesight will get worse and he'll eventually die or lose his sight when he uses his Manjikyu? He asked, just to make sure. The Kyubi nodded and nodded, asked another question. How will he be able to keep his eyesight and not get sick? He asked, seeing the fox show a menacing smirk on his face. In order for the boy to keep his sight is to take the eyes of another Uchiha that has the Manjikyu, and he will gain the eternal Manjikyu Sharingan, which will purge the body of the disease, fix your sight, and you'll gain a longer lifespan, not eternal but maybe another 100 years or so, or maybe 50 years. He said that last part to himself, but Naruto still heard it and slightly sweat dropped. Naruto thanked the giant fox for the knowledge, and when he was leaving he felt his eyes burning, causing him to rub his eyes furiously, and when he looked at Itachi, it made the Uchiha's face to register a shocked look. Naruto had gained the Manjikyu Sharingan from the Kyubi, who had unlocked it, seeing as Naruto now knew about it. End flashback. Naruto's own Manjikyu sprang to life and they stared at each other until Naruto started talking. Itachi, didn't I tell you to stop using those eyes? I haven't found a way to negate the effects of the disease, he said, crossing his arms at his brother. Itachi shook his head and cancelled his Manjikyu, as did Naruto, but kept his Sharingan activated. I keep asking you to see if the Kyubi negate the effects, but you keep denying the request. Now what is it that you needed to talk to me about? He said, sitting up and pushing the covers off of him. Naruto's once playful face went blank in an instant, making Itachi's do the same. The coup is going to happen in a week's time. I just came here to tell you the news. He said, his face returning to regular as he twisted the ends of his muscle shirt. Itachi's face stayed blank as he processed the information, until his face slightly turned to an annoyed one. Wait a minute, you woke me up at 2 in the morning to tell me the clan's ninjas were going to attack. Get out, I'm going back to sleep, he said, grabbing his covers and turning over, trying to go back to the dreamland. Naruto looked embarrassed as he rubbed the back of his head. Well, I guess I could have told you some other time, but I had to tell you now. I could feel myself being followed whenever the sun is up and sometimes when the sun is down. I think Fugaku is having me watched constantly to make sure I don't tell the plans of the assault to the Hokage. I only decided to lose the tails now to come here, he said as his face went to a serious one, sensing movement outside. The eldest Uchiha groaned silently as he was also being watched sometimes, but it was only whenever Naruto was near. He thought it was because Naruto knew the plans, and he never went to any of the meetings, since he didn't like the idea of fighting the village and trying to take over. You still didn't tell me why you couldn't tell me any other time, he said, looking at Naruto from over his shoulder. But he didn't see him. He shrugged and tried to go back to sleep. He then slightly said, "About time the clone left." With Naruto. Naruto appeared outside of the Uchiha compound. He swept his hand through his hair, feeling the ninja tailing him go the other way thanks to his shadow clone dispelling. He looked around a little and started jumping towards the Hokage's office. Moving quickly and silently through the air was like second nature to him. He appeared outside the window and slipped himself in silently, not to disturb the still working Hokage, who was grumbling about extra work. Thank Kami, a distraction, the old man whispered to himself as he looked at Naruto. So what can I do for you, Naruto-kun? I don't recall giving your team a mission or anything, so how come you're not asleep like everyone else in the village? He asked as Naruto sat in the chair across the old Kage. I'm sorry for the intrusion, Hokage-ji, but earlier today I was in another meeting with the Uchiha about the attack on your person, and they discussed that they were going to attack at the end of the week, he said, bowing his head slightly in respect and stared at the serious face worn by his leader. So they are acting. Are all the Uchiha going to attack? The Hokage asked, wondering if all of them were going to attack at once or in waves. They're going to come at once, Hokage-sama. I mean, there are only 60 Uchihas total, 40 are civilians and the others are Chunins and Jounins. They literally don't have the numbers to go in waves to wear down defenders, he said as the Hokage nodded at the logic. Then you're going to have to kill them all before they could even begin the coup, a voice said as the door opened, showing a man on a cane and walking into the room, making the two inside to wear a frown. Do you understand? Nip the problem in the bud before people's lives get in danger, the man said as he walked into the light, showing his bandages around his head and one of his eyes. Danzo, what are you doing here so late in the night and disturbing this private meeting? The Hokage asked, glaring at the man, who continued looking at the shocked Naruto. What, you want me to kill the entire clan? That's inhuman. The civilians have nothing to do with the coup. To even think of me killing those civilians for no apparent reason is sickening for me, but as Anbu I have no problem doing what is needed for the village, he said, putting his head down. No, Naruto, you don't have to kill the civilians of the Uchiha clan. Only the active ninjas need to die, preferably the strongest of the clan, and the rest will quit, seeing as the strongest Sharingan holders are not going to be here to help them, Sarutobi said. But if he doesn't kill the civilians, they're going to eventually grow up into ninjas and their parents will tell them how some of their relatives tried to take over the village but were killed by somebody in the night. You don't want that to happen, do you? He said, glaring at the young Anbu. Naruto started getting a little annoyed by the attention. Fine, I'll kill those that need to be killed. I'll observe them more to see if any of the civilians are aware of the plans, and if they are, then they're added to the list. The ones not aware will be spared, he said, disappearing from the office in a burst of electricity. Some of the static shocked Danzo and Sarutobi, making some of their hairs stand up. You're a fool, Sarutobi. If some of them are spared, then a coup will be in the future of this village, the one-eyed man said, turning around and heading back to his HQ to prepare some plans of his own. The old man just glared at the retreating man's back and got back to his paperwork. No, Danzo, you're the fool. Killing uselessly is not something that you used to do. What happened to you? He thought to himself as he got back to work. 4 days later. It was around 4 o'clock and Naruto was staring at the traveling Uchiha walk through their own dirt road of their compound. He sat atop a building with no one paying any attention to him, and if someone did look up, they will wave and say good afternoon or just nod at him, in which he will say hi back or nod back. According to his calculations, 10 of the civilians knew about the coup and they were either retired shinobi or is in the family of an active ninja. Most of them were old so they wouldn't be a challenge when the time came to kill them. He looked at the sky and thought, he was thinking about how he will kill them before they decided to attack. He was brought out of his thought when an Uchiha Chunin appeared behind him. Bowing because of his status as an Anbu, he rose a second later and started talking. "Naruto-san, Fugaka-sama would like to see you," he said simply as he and Naruto disappeared and reappeared in front of the central meeting building in the center of the compound. Naruto entered and looked at all the ninja the Uchiha had waiting for the meeting to start. Fugaku looked at the young Anbu enter and smirked. "Now that Naruto-kun is here, the meeting can begin. For the first order of business, I believe that we should push up the deadline for the coup," he said looking at the Uchiha in front of him. Naruto's face didn't betray his surprise as he had a feeling something like this was going to happen. Don't ask him how. All he could tell you is that his gut predicted something like this happening. The coup will happen tomorrow morning when everyone is just waking up. They'll too surprised about the sudden attack to do anything in time, and by then it'll be too late, since my adoptive son Naruto-kun would have already killed the old man Sarutobi and the Uchiha will be the leaders of this villager," he said as cheering rung through the room, as some even slapped the back of Naruto in encouragement. "But before the sun falls from the sky, a problem will have to be dealt with. My son Itachi is not going to be part of the coup and Naruto will be the one to either have him join us or kill him, to prevent him from stopping the coup," he said looking at Naruto, whose face was set in shock at the idea of him fighting Itachi. He couldn't possibly fight his brother for real, to the death like Fugaku was insinuating he would do. Not after all they've been through, he wouldn't do it, no matter what the man said. Naruto was broken out of his musing when he felt a hand on his shoulder. He looked up and stared Fugaku in the eyes. His eyes were hard and cold as steel. He knew that Hill will have to kill his son and he had no remorse about it, but beneath that steely look he could tell that Fugaku was hoping that he would be able to sway Itachi to their side. Naruto continued to stare the man in the eye who had activated his Sharingan for some reason, so he activated his own. "Don't worry, Fugaka-sama, the mission will be done. By tomorrow morning you will either be fighting side by side with your side or later be going to his funeral," he said as his Sharingan spun quickly, and the rest of the Uchiha cheered at his very short speech. 5 hours later. Naruto stood atop the entrance arch of the Uchiha compound. Beside him stood Itachi. They were both dressed in their Anbu uniforms. Naruto had put on a bandana to hide his blonde hair. Naruto looked to his partner in crime. "Let's not worry about the consequences now. Let's just get this over with and do it quickly and quietly," he said quietly as Itachi nodded and they sped through the compound. They soon split up and killed the ones they needed to in their sleep. But sooner or enough a scream was heard and many woke up and walked outside their homes to find the problem, only to scream again as bodies were on the ground, covered in their blood. 10 minutes ago. In an unknown location, a man stood bathed in shadow. It looked like he was on top of something because there were 5 people below him. They were bowed but dressed as Anbu, the only difference were their blank, white masks. "Remember the warning, soldiers, I want each and every one of them killed, and if they interfere kill Naruto and Itachi, something about them intrigues me. Bring back all the heads you can carry," he said as the 5 men disappeared to complete their mission. Back to real time. Naruto sped through the compound slicing the backs and fronts of all those that stood in his way. He killed a couple of civilians that wasn't aware of the coup that was going to happen in the morning, but he paid it no mind. As an Anbu he was used to killing those that weren't supposed to witness something that was not supposed to be witnessed, and massacring the Uchiha clan was not supposed to be witnessed. He jumped and threw some kunai and shuriken at other ninjas and civilians in the street. With Itachi he was practically doing the same thing, staying on top of the buildings and just throwing kunai and shurikens at the people below, keeping up his speed as he went by. They soon met and were surrounded by 8 of the remaining active ninja of the Uchiha clan. They disappeared, shocking the Uchiha, and before they could signal the position or attackers of the compound they were killed by kunai, shurikens, and their standard issue blades. Naruto and Itachi then felt various chakra signatures all around the compound and they each heard more screams and looked at each other, before Naruto cursed, "Oh shit! No, that bastard didn't," he said, confusing Itachi as he sped off. Naruto appeared in front of a root Anbu and quickly sliced into the man, but only got the man's arm. The root didn't show that he was hurt and tried to punch Naruto with his other arm. But he was silenced by Naruto, who swung his sword and killed the man by cutting his head off. After dodging the punch, Itachi appeared by Naruto. "Is that a root ninja? What is he doing here?" he said, looking at the head of the ninja rolled off the roof and to the ground below. "I don't know, but I have a pretty good reason. Good thing too, because now I have the perfect excuse," he said, confusing Itachi again as he sped off to take care of the rest of this little group of executioners. Naruto sped through the streets, looking at all the dead bodies in the streets. He sighed, thinking that all this could have been avoided if somebody didn't interfere with his mission. The sounds of screaming were getting shorter and shorter, meaning that most of the people have already been killed and now the assailants were just looking for the rest. Itachi appeared beside Naruto. "Naruto, we have to get to my father and take care of him," he said as Naruto nodded, and they began to run towards the main house. They appeared and witnessed Fugaku fighting with 3 members of Root. Makoto was fighting with him, and they see Naruto and Itachi. "Naruto-kun, Itachi-kun, where have you been? Help us fight these murderers," Makoto said, kicking a Root member a couple of feet away to get some breathing room. Naruto shrugged and dashed towards an unsuspecting member and stabbed his sword in the man's back. He quickly pulled back and swung his sword and sliced the man's head off. Another Root member was about to throw a kunai at the panting Makoto, but Itachi blocked the kunai and quickly blew out a stream of fire, and the close range caused a small explosion, and Itachi flew backwards and quickly righted himself in the air and landed on his feet. His face had some ash on it. Fugaku killed the other Root member and walked to his wife holding his bleeding side. "Honey, the bastard got my liver, cough cough, take care of the kids," he said, falling to the floor just in front of his wife, causing her to cry out and quickly go to his side in despair. Sasuke then ran out of the house and seen all the dead bodies of the Root members and his father, who he ran to. "Tusan, wake up, Tusan," he said, shaking his father's body. He looked at Itachi and Naruto. "Nisans, you have to help Tusan," he said, shedding tears as he continued to shake his father's body, hoping the man will wake up. Itachi walked up to his brother. "Ototo, it's useless, he's dead. The man he was fighting stabbed him in one of his, let's say, death spots," he said, wondering how to explain to his brother while keeping the graphic words out of the explanation. Naruto looked as the family hugged together and stared at the 3 Root members that was littering the floor around the house. "Hey, wasn't there 5 of these guys?" he said, putting up a hand and counting off the dead ones on his fingers. "Let's see, there was the first guy to die, and then these 3, so what happened to the other chakra signature I felt in the beginning?" he asked himself before he felt a short chakra spike behind Makoto and Sasuke. Itachi felt it too and quickly grabbed both his mother and brother and jumped to the side, avoiding the spikes of earth that were quickly rising out of the earth. "Damn, I almost got you two, you slick bastard," the man said, walking out of the shadows. Naruto glared at the man until he recognized the build and sound of the man's voice. "Hey Chero, what the hell are you doing in the Uchiha compound?" he said before he could stop himself, since he already knew. "Never mind, don't answer that, I already know, which means you have to die," he said, gripping his sword handle and pulled it from the ground where he had it stabbed into and dashed towards the man, who pulled his own sword out, and they began to fight it out. Itachi, seeing his captain in trouble, got up to help but was stopped when Naruto spoke up. "No, Itachi. This is my fight. Just protect your family for the time being," the blonde said, taking off his bandana and throwing it in front of Chero, and watched it fly in the man's face. He acted quick and stabbed his sword into the man, who disappeared in a puddle of mud. "Well, I didn't know Taicho could fight so dirty," the man said, "and for the last time, Chero isn't my real name. It's a name given to me by my master. I have no real name," he said, going through some hand signs. "Doton Jishin, earthquake," he said, slamming his hands on the ground, causing the ground to shake. Naruto knew he was going to do this jutsu and went through his own hand seals. "Raitun, Hakai no Baruto, bolts of destruction," Naruto said as he pointed his hands at the nameless man, and multiple bolts of lightning fired from his hands. The man ended his short jutsu, seeing as bolts were being sent his way, and they were coming quick. The first 3 missed because of them being too far away and him moving out of the way. The last 7 hit a different part of his body. One in the left leg, another in the right leg, one in the stomach, another one in his left rib, one in his left shoulder, another one shocked his left arm, and the last one went into his groin. That bolt was on accident and it made Naruto shudder in terror. When he heard the man who was still alive scream in pain, it didn't matter how much training you went through to not show emotions. If you get hit in the nuts by anything, you're gonna scream and yell until the pain goes away. Naruto walked up to the electrified man and swept his hand through his hair, and pointed his finger at the man's head. It's a shame, you know, after all those missions together, who would have thought I would be the one to kill you? And just so you know, this is for Zabuza and Haku, who told me to punish you for using your cheap trick to capture them a long time ago. He said as electricity surged through his fingers and he thought, Raitun, Mitsuzoshu white lightning. He said as the lightning shot into the man's head and going through it into the ground. He turned around and looked at the others. Sasuke was amazed at the ninjutsu that was being used but was shocked and a little disgusted by the kill. Mikoto wore a smile of pride at the display of one of her children and Itachi smiled at the way his brother handled things. The fight would have been over way earlier if he would have helped, but he had the feeling that Naruto was just showing off to Sasuke, showing him that with enough training he would be able to do the same thing. Naruto looked at the 9-year-old Sasuke and gave him a thumbs up. It's okay now, Sasuke Ototo. The bad man won't hurt anybody anymore, he said, making Itachi's sweat dropped when he seen one of Naruto's tooth shine. Naruto created a dozen shadow clones. Okay, I want each of you to search the compound and bring the survivors here. If there are any, he thought, looking at the root member in front of him. 15 minutes later. There was 5 survivors out of 60 members of the Uchiha clan, Sasuke, Mikoto, and 3 other clan members. One was a boy the age of 7. The others were twins girls the age of 4. The new 3 were brother and sisters, and the boy was protecting his sisters. The boy was named Daisuke. One of the girls was named Mai while the other was called Kai. Mai had a ponytail while Kai didn't. Another difference was that Mai was dressed in the color dark blue while Kai was dressed in the color dark gray. Daisuke was wearing gray shorts and a dark blue high-collared shirt. It was obvious that Mikoto was the only surviving adult of the Uchiha clan, and now had to take care of 3 more kids. You don't know how ecstatic she was about raising more children. She loved raising kids is what I'm trying to say. Mikoto hugged the children one more time and led them into the clan house. She looked at Naruto and Itachi, who were watching Sasuke show the little kids around. Hey, now that I think of it, why are you 2 dressed in your Anbu armor so late into the night? She asked, looking at both of them curiously. Naruto spoke up first. I was going to the Hokage Tower to see if I could get a quick mission, he said, and I got Itachi to see if he wanted to come with me, you know, for extra protection. He said, not telling a full lie, since he did get Itachi and killing the ninja of the Uchiha clan were their mission, they just didn't go to the Hokage Tower. The woman shrugged her shoulders. Oh, okay. Come in the house, take a shower, go to sleep, and I'll have breakfast ready for you in the morning, she said, walking inside the house. After she went inside the house, 3 squads of Anbu and the Hokage appeared in front of them. Naruto report, Sarutobi said. The mission was going along smoothly until Root appeared and started recklessly killing everybody, making noise and drawing attention to themselves to draw in their prey. They were effective until me and Itachi encountered them fighting Mikoto and Fugaku. I had killed one before and killed another when I got here. Itachi killed another that was about to kill his mother. Fugaku killed the 4th but was killed in the process. The last one, Kuma or Chero, or I don't even know what to call him anymore, was the last one to be killed, and I did it. After that, I created some shadow clones to look for survivors and found 3 children, all brother and sisters, 1 boy the age of 7 and 2 twin girls the age of 4. They just went in the house with Mikoto and Sasuke, who also survived along with me and Itachi. Naruto said, scratching the back of his neck while he yawned, which was rare because he only did that when he was super sleepy. The Hokage nodded his head and looked around. Okay, I want all of you to clean this place up, he said, commanding his ANBU, excluding Naruto and Itachi. So with the job done, if anyone asks, it was 5 rogue group members that committed the act, you 2 understand? He asked both of them, to which they each nodded their heads. I don't know about you, Naruto, but I'm taking a shower. I'll see you tomorrow at breakfast, Itachi said, walking to his house. Now it was only Naruto and Sarutobi. You know what, Hokage Gigi? I've been in ANBU for the last 5 years. I'm tired of the endless missions and the timely hours. I think I'm going to retire and become a jounin like Kakashi and Ai-san and Gai-sensei. I think Itachi would be perfect to take my place as captain of the team. He deserves it and is ready for it. The blonde said, sweeping his hand through his hair, and yawned again. I understand, Naruto-kun. I was going to have you retire from the ANBU after this mission anyway. The paperwork is already filled out. As of tomorrow morning, you will be Namikaze Uzumaki Uchiha Naruto, elite jounin of Konoha. You can go enjoy your last night as an ANBU captain. Chapter 9. Time has passed. 3 years later. We see our main character Naruto. Now the age of 14, he was walking along a dirt road. He has been relaxing the past 3 years, not relaxing as in not training, but relaxing as in his missions weren't as hard as they used to be in ANBU. He now stood at 5 feet and 3 inches. He was wearing a black muscle shirt under a gray padded ANBU-like vest. Over that he wore his standard jounin vest, which he changed the color to a very dark gray, nearly black. He wore some fingerless gloves that went past his elbows, and over his right arm he wore an ANBU-style forearm bracer, and on the back of the gloves was a metal plate that had the Konoha insignia on it. He wore some regular black cargo pants, and a gray belt that hung loosely around it. He wore black boots that had little spikes on the bottom. He kept his ANBU katana in the new house he inherited from his father after turning 11, and obtained a new one that he wore on his waist. The scabbard was red, near the bottom was white tape that wrapped around it, the handle was wrapped in designless red tape, and the guard was a plain black circle. He wore his headband around his neck and tied the back of his hair in a ponytail. On his right arm was his ANBU tattoo, and on his left arm was a seal that resembled a swirl that held his kunais. Around his neck was a necklace that also had the ANBU-style tattoo hanging off the end of it. /N. Look at my profile picture to get a better look at him. Ever since he became an elite jounin, the new clan head to the Namikaze clan, and being in the streets, many of the civilians would wave to him and wish him a good morning or a good afternoon. They were never mean to him, maybe because of him losing his family, the Uchiha, or because he was now on the council, and that only happened when he agreed to take on a genin team. And speaking of the Uchiha, Mikoto continued to raise her kids, and with Naruto not in ANBU and being home whenever he didn't have a mission, he helped most of the time. When she wasn't helping the children with whatever she was training herself to get back into shape, since she wanted to better protect her new family, she didn't go back to being an active ninja but just trained, as she was the new clan head of the Uchiha clan. Sasuke continued to go to the academy. He was now 12 and he was doing surprisingly well considering the fact that his family was nearly wiped off the face of the earth. He always says that at least he has his brothers and his mother that are here and there for him. His graduation from the academy was going to be in a couple of weeks, so he eventually be one of the newest genins of Konoha. He was around the skill of a mid-chunin, since both Itachi and Naruto trained him whenever they weren't training Daisuke, Mai, or Kai. Remember Daisuke the little boy? He was now 10 years old, and was always trying to ask either Naruto or Itachi for training so he could get stronger to better protect himself and his sisters. He was going to the academy and is the top of his class and has been since the term started. He is at high genin level and will only continue to grow stronger. Mai and Kai recently turned 7 and each made Naruto and Itachi their other brothers. Mai liked Naruto the most while Kai liked Itachi the most, and each of the guys trained their individual sisters when they had the time. They are at mid-genin level and can already do one of the 3 academy graduation ninjutsus, the Kamarimi. Itachi stayed in ANBU until about 3 weeks ago. He had been on missions, left and right after Naruto gave him the title of captain of the team. He also had to work with strangers, other than Yugugo Nico, who wanted to stay longer, for some reason. And speaking of Yugugo, they recently went on a date. It was a nice moonlit walk through the park, after having dinner at one of the most expensive restaurants in the village. The ironic thing was they could both afford it easily with their ANBU salary. Anko continues to work with Ibiki and the interrogation and torture section of ANBU, and Kurenai is looking forward to trying out for the Jounin exams. Remember the picture of that one chick in the bedroom of Anko Inuzuka Hana? Well, she was introduced to Naruto about half a year ago. She had thought he was cute for his age, which was about 12, and was dumbfounded with the fact that he was a Jounin, while she was 17 and wasn't even a Jounin yet. She was now 18 and decided to stay a Chunin since she loved working with animals and being a veterinarian for them. He looked to the sky and thought, and now that he thought about it, she was the only one that was a Chunin without trying to go up a rank like Kurenai was. I'm going to have a girl of every rank excluding genin. He thought, chuckling to himself. Is anything wrong, Naruto-sensei? Said a voice behind him. He turned to see his genin team. They were 14, showing that they were from the last batch of genins from last year. They were so surprised to see that their sensei was their exact age. There were 2 girls and 1 boy on his team. One of the girls had dark bluish hair and dark blue eyes to match. She was 4 feet 8 inches and she had a slim build. She wore a simple dark blue shirt and black pants, with dark blue sandals. She had her ninja pouch on the back of her left hip and her shuriken holder on her left leg, showing that she was left-handed. Her hair was short and barely reached her neck. Her breasts were a large B-cup, and she wasn't a fangirl, which was the most important thing to Naruto. Her name was Sakana, fish, AI love, and you guessed it right, she loved sushi. And after every mission was complete, she would ask to go to the sushi place to celebrate. She was the team's ninjutsu specialist and helped with the strategies. The other girl had silver hair and pupil-less white eyes, showing she was a Hyuga, and Naruto still can't understand why her hair is silver. She was 4 feet and 7 inches and also had a slim build. She wore some dark gray pants and a dark gray shirt. She wore black sandals. Her ninja pouch was on the back of her right hip, and her shuriken holder was on her right and left legs, showing she was ambidextrous. Unlike her teammate AI, her hair was long and reached the middle of her back. Her breasts were a small C-cup. Her headband was around her forehead, over her cursed seal, meaning that she was in the branch family, and when Naruto learned that she was going to be on his team, he told the Hyugas that they should not activate her cursed seal under any circumstances or they'll face his wrath. And they listened since he was very powerful and didn't underestimate his strength not one bit. Her name was Hyuga Hinode, Sunrise, and she was grateful for what Naruto did for her. She was the team's taijutsu and fuinjutsu specialist. The last member of Naruto's team was the boy. He had emerald green eyes and short black hair. He was 5 feet and had a slim and athletic physique. He was getting muscles, but he still had to work on them. He wore a black shirt under his dark green jacket and dark green cargo shorts with black boots. On the front of his boots were slots for his hidden knives, and when he added chakra to them, the knives would come out and he would kick people and it would hurt a lot. He had gloves that also had metal plates on the back like Naruto, but it didn't have the Konoha insignia on it. He wore his headband around his right arm, and his name was Chikyu, Earth, Heichii, Fierce. Believe it or not, but he was the team's genjutsu and kenjutsu specialist. They all could do Tai, Gen, Nin, Fuin, Ken, and strategies excellent, but their favorites are what they have listed. AI's elemental affinity is water and wind, Hinode's elemental affinity is lightning and fire, and Heichi's affinity is fire and earth, so they all have all 5 of the elemental affinities. How convenient for Naruto, because now he could pass down most, if not all of his knowledge to his students. All of their skill level is around high chunin, and they're continuing to grow in strength. Naruto looked at his silver-haired student. No, Chan. Nothing is wrong, just thinking about what I've gained after gaining you as my students last year, he said, resisting the urge to rub her head. He turned his head when he heard the sound of people talking and looked ahead of him and saw the town where they had to meet their client. Finally, about time we got here. If I had to walk another mile, I would have committed seppuku, Heichii said, throwing his hands in the air as they passed the village gates. The 2 girls resisted their need to giggle at Heichii's antics, and Naruto chuckled at his friend's antics, but stopped after a second and glared at him. What was that, Heichii? Did I hear you say you want to run a mile? Naruto said, stopping his glare to open his ears and lean towards the boy. Heichii started sweating and gulped. No, Naruto-sensei. I was just saying what a nice day it was. A perfect day to walk in the forest, he said, waving his hands in front of his face and shaking his head at the same time. This time the girls did giggle and Naruto patted the black-haired boy's shoulder. It's okay. I feel the same way. Now let's see what our client wants us to do, he said, jumping on the roof of the nearest building. He looked west and led his team to the house of the team's client. Naruto dropped in front of a medium-sized house and knocked on the door. After a couple of seconds, they all heard the voice of a woman from behind the door. Wait a minute, I need to, put my face on, the lady said, making Naruto and his team's sweat drop at the way she said it. The blonde sensei turned to Hinode. Check what she's doing. Don't worry, I won't get angry at you for peeking on somebody. He reassured her, and she nodded and activated her Byakugan. Sensei. She put a couch in front of the door, and now she's dragging her table in front of the door, Hinode said, making her teammates' sweat drop more. Anybody else in the house? AI asked, looking at the second floor of the house, wondering if she actually saw somebody in the window just now. Hinode nodded her head. Yeah, 2 kids are upstairs. They look around the ages of 6 and 7, she said as she continued to watch the women stack things in front of the door. Hei grew tired of the woman's actions and knocked on the door again. Don't worry, ma'am, we're ninjas from Konoha and we just want to finish our mission quickly. We are not going to hurt you, he said, making Naruto nod his head in acceptance. They waited there for another minute before they heard the sound of moving furniture and a couple more minutes before the long series of unlocking of the locks, making Naruto and his team sweat drop at the amount of clicking they heard. AI leaned toward Hinode. You would think she lives in a vault or something, she whispered, making Hinode giggle a little. Oh, you have no idea, Hinode thought as the lady cracked the door open a little. Did you say Konoha ninjas? She asked slowly and stuttering in the beginning. The ninjas nodded their heads and the lady swung the door open fully. Well, why didn't you say so? Come on in. I have much to tell you about. She said, her bashfulness gone and her bold and prideful behavior coming to the surface. The team of Shinobi Face faltered but got back up a second later, dusting themselves off, and entered the house. They each gasped in shock and surprise. Even Hinode, who had already seen it, was still surprised how the house looked from the inside. The house was filled with paintings and even sculptures made of fine basalt, obsidian, and other various materials, and even some metals. It was absolutely beautiful. Naruto stopped looking at the priceless paintings and sculptures and turned to the women. These are beautiful and expertly created. Did you do them yourself? He asked as his students continued looking at the art. She smiled and nodded her head. Why? Yes, I did, she said until she realized something. Oh, how rude of me. My name is Hamazaki Ayumi. It's very nice to meet you, she said, extending her hand toward Naruto. She was 5 feet and 7 inches. Her hair was a light and faded blonde, much like Tsunade of the Sannin. She was wearing a white kimono with pink flower petals falling down the left of it. She wasn't wearing any sandals and her hair was done in a short ponytail. Her breasts were a large D cup, and her waist was small and slim. Her figure was that of an hourglass. She was quite an attractive woman, at the age of 32. Namake's Naruto and I feel the same way. This is my team. The one with the silver hair is Hinode-chan. The one with the dark blue hair is Ai-chan, and the boy is Heichi-kun, he said as each of his students bowed to the women. She gasped. But you're all so young. Are you sure you can handle the mission? Ayumi asked, worried about their safety. Heichi grew irritated at the jab at his skills because of his age, but before he could tell Ayumi what he thought of the comment, Naruto covered his mouth, sensing that he was going to say something. Don't worry, ma'am, we can complete the mission. So, what is it? He said, letting go of Heichi's mouth and stopping the girls from giggling as they all got a little serious. It's my husband. He's been taken by a group of ninjas. They want my paintings and sculptures in exchange for my husband. They said that just stealing the art would take the fun out of their whole operation. Those bastards. She said the last part softly while looking down at her feet. She lifted her head quickly and looked Naruto right in the eye. You have to get him back, she said, frantically missing her husband. Don't worry, we'll bring him back. Where is it that the shinobi have him and how many are there? He asked, crossing his arms. They come here every Saturday, telling me to hurry up with the decision or my husband will be killed. It's been like this for the past 2 weeks. Luckily tomorrow is Saturday, and if I was to remember correctly, there are 5 of them, from the village of Sand, she said, giving them a small sad smile. Naruto nodded his head in agreement. When Hinode stepped up, did they give you a location to take your art to? And do they give you the proof of life for your husband? She asked as blonde woman nodded. Yes, they do give a proof of life. They bring him every time bound and gagged, showing that he is indeed alive. They then hit him a couple of times, so I know it's not an illusion, and they said they will be in the forest on the east side of the village. She said, sitting on her couch in the living room. Naruto and his team nodded. Okay, we'll go handle it immediately, the blonde male said as he turned around and exited the house. His students bowed one more time and followed suit. Naruto went into mission mode. Hinode-chan, use your Byakugan to scan the forest. AI-chan, when Hinode finds their location, I want you to help me plan the attack. Heichi-kun will cast a genjutsu around their area and will quickly dispose of them and take the husband of Ayumi back to her. You three understand? He asked, not even looking at his team as they waited for Hinode to spot the enemy. So he didn't see his team nodded their heads. The Bluinet found their targets and they set out to the northeast. Remember team, suppress your chakra in case they have a sensor in the group, he said as he felt their chakra levels drop. He smiled in pride at his team's growth. Minutes later, they entered the clearing where the Suna shinobi were camping. It seems they were getting irritated by the wife and wanted to just steal what they wanted instead of doing it the boring way. Quiet yourself, Jinta. The fun will begin as soon as the wife gives us what we want, and then we can kill both of them, said the leader of the group. But Seiki, I still don't understand why we can't just kill the bastards now and take what we want. We're just giving her enough time to call some Konoha shinobi to help her, Jinta said to the now revealed leader. When the man didn't respond, he looked and seen blood all around him. His comrades have been killed. He yelled and was shaken until real blood came out of the head of the person shaking him. The assault had begun with 3 down. Naruto jumped into the clearing and launched a quick series of lightning bolts at the remaining 2, shocking and killing them. He then quickly ran to the only tent in the clearing, which he knew belonged to the leader of the group of Chunin Suna shinobi. He entered and untied the unconscious husband and threw him over his shoulders. Exiting his tent, he nodded to his concealed students and they ran back to the village with their package in possession. 3 hours later, they made it back to the village after giving Ayumi back her husband and was rewarded with a painting, which was sealed in a scroll and kept by Naruto, who promised to give the painting to the one that would win their next team spar. The team walked into the office of the Hokage and Naruto gave the mission report to the man. Excellent, that's another completed mission for your team, Naruto-kun. You trained them well, he said, puffing on his pipe. Naruto bowed a little to show his respect. Thanks, Gigi. Just wait, these 3 will soon become the next legendary 3. The blonde said with pride as his team blushed at the praise given to them. The room was filled with the laughter of the Hokage. I believe your declaration because at this rate, in just a half a decade they will be close. Not there but close. After all, the Densetsu no Sannin were trained by yours truly, he said, puffing out a ring of smoke. Naruto laughed. As was I mean, if Jiraiya trained my father to be Hokage, then I could too, he said, chuckling along with his grandfather. So where's Itachi and I? Is he on a mission or is he on break? He asked the leader of the village after his team left to go home and shower. He is on a mission. You're going to have to find someone else to train with my boy, the old man said, as Naruto nodded and left the room in a swirl of wind and water. In the streets. Now Naruto was walking in the streets with no thought in mind. He wanted to train at the exact moment, but he was hungry. How could I solve this problem? He thought to himself as he scratched his head. I think you just got your answer, Kit, the fox said in his head. And just at that second, a kunai flew through the air, slicing in his right cheek. He didn't stop his walking as he knew it was Anko looking to have some fun. Ah, Naruto-kun, you do love me, one of his purple-haired goddesses said as she wrapped her arms around his head and leaned into his back, pressing her breast into it, as she licked his cheek, which was getting difficult with the walking and the wound healing. Anko pouted at the source of her fetish closing up. So what kind of mission did you have, Naruto-kun? She said, getting from behind him and walking on the side of him. It was just some ninjas wanting something, but didn't want to take it by force. The idiots wanted to do some kind of ransom drop-off thing, so me and my team just killed them and gave the woman her husband back, Naruto said as they neared the dango stand they would meet on occasions. Naruto looked around the shop and found Kurenai sitting by herself with a cup of tea in her hand. She looked up and smiled seeing Anko and Naruto. It took you too long enough. I've been waiting here ever since I felt your chakra signature enter the village. The red-eyed goddess said, looking at Naruto. Naruto rubbed the back of his head as he sat down. I'm sorry. I had to report my mission to the Hokage with my team. You know how it is, he said, chuckling nervously as Kurenai leveled him with a small cute glare. It won't happen again, Naruto said as Kurenai smiled and put her cup of tea down. So Nai-chan, you going to get a team of wet behind the ears genin in 2 weeks? Anko asked before ordering a large plate of dango and a cup of sake, with Naruto ordering the same, minus the cup of sake, and just ordered some tea. Yeah, I feel like I can do it again, and I hope this team passes, unlike last year's team, Kurenai said, shaking her head as she remembered what happened with her team last year. She looked at Naruto, nearly envious at his team. So Naruto-kun, how is your team? She said. Naruto nearly shivered at her tone. They're alright, they are getting stronger and I'm thankful for that. Hinode is absolutely excellent with her Byakugan. Her Jukin is top-notch and she's in the process to learn more taijutsu styles to incorporate her Jukin into. Her skill in Fuinjutsu is rapidly rising now that her speed and accuracy in drawing the seals has increased. In less than a decade's time, at this pace, she'll be an expert. I wouldn't be surprised if her ancestors were Naras because she is smart and knows just what strategy is for what situation, but unlike the Naras, she has the reserves to do way more because her ninjutsu library far exceeds what a genin is supposed to know thanks to me. Not to mention that her reserves are higher than most of the boys in her class. And lastly, Heichii, he's trying to be like you, making up his own genjutsus, and it's not just genjutsu that he specializes in, he becoming quite a skilled fighter when it comes to kenjutsu. Naruto said, gloating about his students without even knowing he was gloating about his students. But they did hear a sense of pride in Naruto's voice as he spoke, so he must have known what he was doing. All right, we get it. Your students are skilled. You can stop your bragging now, Anko said with her hands in her face and Kurenai shooting him a big glare, causing Naruto to gulp and apologize by taking her hand and kissing the back of it and apologizing as he did. So Nai-chan, you want to have a quick spar with us after lunch? Anko asked with Naruto nodding his head and giving her the baby fox eyes jutsu. And he already knew that she couldn't resist his eyes and smile when she nodded her head. Great job, Kit. I have trained you well, the Kyuubi said, nodded his head with a sense of pride. The blonde-haired thanked his furry demon, and after lunch they each got up and walked to the nearest training ground to begin their training. Chapter 10: Genin Teams and Dangerous Criminals. 2 weeks later. It was now the aftermath of the graduation exam for the senior academy students. Some passed, some failed, some quit before they even tried the first test. It's safe to say the parents weren't happy to hear that from their son or daughter. Irika was standing in front of his students, feeling proud of himself for preparing them for their future as shinobi of Konohagakure. But beneath his proud feelings was annoyance at the behavior of his students. They were being so noisy it was grating on his nerves. He looked around the classroom and spotted only 4 students that would survive in the ninja world. Let's see, only Nara Shikamaru, Aburame Shino, Hyuga Hinata, and Uchiha Sasuke have a shot of surviving in this world. And maybe Inuzuka Kiba if he listens to the right head, and also maybe Akimichi Choji if he focuses on his training instead of hanging around with Shikamaru and watching clouds with him. Irika was thinking and couldn't think further, because the noise just went off, setting him off. Would you all shut up and stay still? He yelled using his classic big-headed technique, and it effectively shut his students up. He let out a long sigh. Sorry. I promised myself I wouldn't do that since it's your last day here, he said, apologizing to his students. Now I'm going to announce the teams. Team 1. He started listing off the names of the teams. You could hear the shouts of disappointment from all of the fangirls since as they weren't paired with their Sasuke-kun, who only blushed at his fangirls and apologized to them all, causing them to sigh in fangirly love, with hearts all over the place. Team 7, Haruno Sakura, Uchiha Sasuke, and Hanyaku Shiro. Your sensei will be Hatake Kakashi. Team 8, Hyuga Hinata, Inuzuka Kiba, and Aburame Shino. Your sensei will be Yuhi Kurenai. Team 9 are already ninjas, and Team 10 Nara Shikamaru, Yamanaka Ino, Akimichi Choji, your sensei will be Sarutobi Asuma. Well, there you go, class. It's been great knowing each and every one of you, and I hope you all become great ninjas. Irika said, smiling at his class before walking to his desk, getting his papers and leaving the class with a body flicker. Sakura looked at Shiro. Hey Shiro-kun, do you want to go on a celebratory date with me? She asked the hot dead last of the class, who shook his head, blowing her offer in the wind. Tears nearly fell from her eyes at the rejection of her offer. Well, I didn't want to go anyway. She screamed at him and threw a book at the boy, who barely dodged it from his seat. The pink-haired girl huffed and glanced at Sasuke and was about to ask him when he asked her to go by herself, which she sadly nodded to and began to stand up. Hanyaka Shiro was an orphan from the Kyuubi attack 12 years ago. He learned that the container of the beast was Naruto and vowed to kill him and the Kyuubi in the process. Ever since the day he learned of this, he has been training himself to the bone to complete his own personal vendetta. Shiro has white hair and light blue eyes. He's wearing only a white jounin-like vest and white cargo pants with white boots. He wore a plain white ninjutsu on his back and white gloves to match his new white headband on his forehead. He was 4 feet and 3 inches and had a lean and muscled body, showing that he trains a lot in taijutsu. You know you're not supposed to leave the room without our sensei, right? Shiro said after seeing Sakura stand up, stopping her before she fully stood up. She blushed lightly and sat back in her seat in embarrassment. It wasn't long before she got angry again. But her temper had to wait as the door opened, showing Sarutobi Asuma walk in. Team 10, follow me. He simply said and walked back out the door, with his team following behind him. Minutes ticked by and other senseis came and picked up their students, including Kurenai. Now it was only Team 7 that was left in the classroom, and they were going to have to wait an hour or two for their sensei. With Naruto. Naruto was on the opposite building of the academy watching the students getting picked up by their senseis. He had just finished talking with Kurenai. She was a little nervous about taking another team, and Naruto just took away her fear by telling her that it'll be all right, and just like that her fear was gone. When she left, Kakashi appeared behind him. Yo, Naruto-kun, how's life been treating you? He asked, sitting down next to his brother in arms. Naruto glanced at the silver-haired man. It's been all right, Kaka-senpai. I've been taking it easy ever since I got in my team, not as much as you, he said, chuckling at the small frown on Kakashi's face. Well, I'll have you know that I've been training ever since I retired from Anbu, you just never seen me, he said, crossing his arms and looking at his new team of genin. So why are you watching these genin and not with your own? He asked, still looking at his genin. Naruto shrugged his shoulders, until he remembered just why he was here. Oh, Sasuke has given me some information about one of his classmates. It seems this boy wants to kill the Kyuubi for killing his parents, he said, looking at Kakashi. But in order to kill the fox, he'll have to kill you in the process, the silver-haired jounin said, glancing at his team. Am I to agree that he has nothing against you personally? It's just the fox he wants? Kakashi said, still looking at Shiro, knowing just by how large his chakra reserves were that he was the one that wanted the Kyuubi dead. The blue-eyed Uchiha nodded his head and stood from his seat. It matters not to me. Just as long as he doesn't go AWOL, I won't have to kill him. Hopefully you could get the idea out of his head altogether, Naruto said, walking to the edge of the roof and looked back at Kakashi. Senpai, shouldn't you be picking up your team right now? He asked. The scarecrow shook his head and pulled out his book. I'll get to that eventually, he said, and turned a page and giggled a little. The blonde chuckled and shook his head, muttering, Same ol' senpai. After that he stepped off the edge and fell, but halfway through the fall a tornado swirled around him and disappeared. Kakashi looked to the side where Naruto jumped off. Show off, he muttered, turned another page and giggled. With Naruto. Now the blonde was walking through the village thinking to himself, let's see, what to do. I never should have given the team off to train on their own. He berated himself. Well, you could train yourself, the fox said, making Naruto agree and change his direction towards a training ground. Naruto was now walking through the forest with his hands in his pockets, He was in no hurry and was just enjoying the walk before he had to work. During the work, he noticed somebody leaning against the tree, the shadows blocking the face. He looked closer and noticed that it was Yugugo. "Hey Yu-chan," Naruto said, waving to the silhouetted figure, who waved back. "Finally you got here. I've been waiting for the last 5 minutes for you to show up," she said, pushing off the tree and walking into the sunlight, showing her face and her ruby-red lipstick. She was out of uniform and only carried her sword, which was hanging off of her back. She was wearing a plain black V-neck shirt, which showed some of her cleavage, and black cargo pants that were taped at the ankles, with regular black shinobi sandals. The blonde jounin looked at her puzzled. "Huh? Did we schedule a training session that I don't remember or something?" he asked, scratching his head in confusion. "Well, it doesn't matter if I planned this or not. Well, I'm ready when you are," he said, shifting his weight on his back leg just in case she decided to attack right away. And it was a good thing he did, because as soon as he finished his sentence, he had to jump back as the purple-haired woman's blade occupied his space a second later. She rushed him before he could take out his own blade and started swinging the sword at him. It wasn't wild like some inexperienced swordsmen or swordswomen would do. It was expertly, and all of it was done for a reason, and that reason was to kill, except Naruto wouldn't stay in one place long enough to get hit. Naruto continued to jump from one place to the next, swiftly dodging his partner's strikes. "I knew I should have taken my sword out of its sheath before I started this little spar," he thought. He knew that it was a kenjutsu-only spar, so he quickly ducked under a swing and swiftly and easily took out a kunai from his pouch and blocked the next strike with it. They entered a quick deadlock, giving Naruto enough time to reach to his left with his left hand and grab his sword. Yugugo ended the deadlock by attempting to kick Naruto in the stomach, but he anticipated the move and moved his waist to the side and spun around the woman and positioned his blade at her neck. "Yield, this match is over," he said in a monotonous tone. This made Yugugo chuckle. "Sure, I would yield as soon as you do," she said, making a movement with her eyes, making him look down. He now could see her own blade at his crotch. When Yugugo seen his eyes widen in surprise, she smirked an evil smirk and started moving it closer and closer, making him sweat more and more. He admitted defeat and took his sword from her neck, but she kept her sword near his crotch until he backed away from it. "Okay, that was a good spar. Let's do this again some other time," the blonde said, rubbing the back of his head after seeing her giggle at winning the spar. He grew a little annoyed at the constant giggling. "Fine, we'll have another go right here, and this time I'll win," he said, getting into a kenjutsu stance, with Yugugo doing the same. After seeing a leaf fall off a tree and hit the floor, they ran at each other and begun a new spar. With Team 7. Sasuke was running through the trees because Sakura stepped on a twig trying to follow him. He stopped and looked into the clearing. Shiro was fighting Kakashi by himself. He sneered for some reason when he seen Sakura throw some shuriken at the silver-haired jounin. He took a quick glance at his pouch and threw some smoke pellets into the clearing, when Shiro and Sakura jumped back. But these weren't ordinary smoke pellets. When the smoke is exposed to oxygen, it explodes. So the resulting explosion caught Kakashi and his teammates by surprise. The one-eyed jounin flew back and his body hit a tree, while the 3 students jumped back into the clearing. "What the hell was that? You trying to kill Sensei?" Sakura scolded Sasuke, who looked at the body of their sensei in mild thought. "I don't think that was enough to kill the legendary Kakashi." "Don't worry, Sakura, I don't think that was enough to kill the man," he said after a while. "Not to mention, he did tell us to come at him with deadly force, and Sasuke was only following orders," Shiro said, also looking at Kakashi's smoking body in thought. The 2 boys stayed back as Sakura went to check on the body. When she came within 5 feet of the body, she could smell the scent of burnt flesh and another burnt scent. She picked up a nearby stick and poked the body. "Sensei, are you alive?" she asked as she continued to poke the body. The boys were behind her when she asked that question, and they slapped their hands to their foreheads. "I can't believe she just asked that." They both thought in unison, and before either of them could tell her how stupid she was, the bell on the middle post rang loudly and the burnt body disappeared in a cloud of smoke and showed a burnt piece of wood. They heard clapping behind them and their eyes widened as they seen their sensei walk out of the woods clapping his hands together. The right side of his body was smoking, and they could see some burned spots on his vest and his pants. Very good, you three. The teamwork was a little unguided, but with some hardcore training, I believe I can fix that, he said, smiling at their faces. Before anyone could get mad at Kakashi, Shiro spoke up. So does that mean we're Genin now? He asked as Kakashi nodded. The new Team 7 cheered, even Sasuke, but that was stopped as Kakashi started talking again. But like I said, I'm gonna put you through the training of a lifetime, so meet here tomorrow at 7 o'clock in the morning to begin the first team training session, he said, smiling before body flickering out of the clearing to go get his burns checked out. After that, Team 7 split up to get ready for the next day, after getting something to eat because they were starving. With the Hokage, Sarutobi was sitting in his seat, smoking his pipe while looking at some important documents laying on his desk. He puffed on his pipe again and spoke up. Jiraiya-kun, I haven't heard from you in a long time. To what do I owe this visit? He asked, looking to his left and seeing Jiraiya entering the room through the window. Damn it. Even after all this time, I still can't sneak up on you, sensei. I guess I still have a lot of training to go through, he said after a sigh as he jumped from the perch and fully entered the room. The old man dumped the ashes from his pipe and put in some new tobacco. You're right, Jiraiya-kun, you need to train more. There is no such thing as too much training. I learned that from Naruto-kun, he said, lighting the pipe with a small ear-rank fire jutsu, used specifically for this use. Jiraiya grew serious at the mention of the blonde. That is why I've visited sensei. My spies all over the elemental nations have given me some dark news. Remember the group that Orochimaru joined all those years ago? Well, it seems that more S-class nuke-nines have joined it. The size of the group are still unknown, but I believe with all the strong missing nines out there it could equal to about 8 or 10. He spoke with a serious tone and a hint of dread and anticipation because he can't wait to fight one of these ninjas. Just which nuke-nines are in the group and what is their reason in forming such a large group of dangerous criminals? The Hokage asked, sensing an upcoming headache. They only told me 3 members and that's all the information they could get. Obviously Orochimaru is in the group, and that alone is terrifying for us. Another is Sunazakasuna no Sasori, Sasori of the Red Sand. And we all know how dangerous his poison and puppets are, and the last known member is Kiri's own Kiri no Kaibutsu, monster in the mist, Hashigaki Kisame. Legend says that he has the chakra reserves and strength to match a legendary bijou. And they're targeting the Jinchurikis around the elemental nations. Their reasons are unknown, and I don't think they ever will be, he said, dropping the bomb on the old man, whose face showed a small hint of fear at the small list of dangerous shinobi in the group. The old man looked down at his desk, his hat shadowing his face. And do you know the worst part? The old man asked in a monotonous voice, creeping the toad Sannin out a little. The white-haired Sannin resisted the urge to answer the man's rhetorical question. The worst part is we don't know who else is in the group and why they chose that specific group of people to target. Sarutobi yelled with killer intent pouring out of every pore in his body. So much of it was there that most of the village felt it. It wasn't enough to bring the Jounins to their knees. It's only because it was so sudden and full of anger that some of the weaker ninjas and civilians missed their next steps and nearly fell. The old man calmed down and stood from his seat and looked out the window, watching as the villagers looked towards his office in slight fear and confusion, before they started going on with their daily lives. My spies has also said that numbers 6 and 7 have gone missing from their villages. We can only believe that they have been taken by this group, Jiraiya said. The Hokage sat back in his seat and emptied his pipe and put more new tobacco, but didn't light it. He looked at his student. Do you know what this group is called? He asked, seeing Jiraiya nod his head. Then tell me the name, he said with a hint of exhaustion in his voice. The name is Akatsuki, and they have been seen wearing black cloaks covered with red clouds, Jiraiya said, just as the door opened and Naruto entered the office. Gigi, what's the problem? I never felt your Ki cover the village before? He asked, hoping his grandfather figure was all right. Sarutobi let a small smile show on his face. Well, you know my student Jiraiya here, he said, nodding towards Jiraiya, who was in shock at how much Naruto looks like his father. He had only seen his picture in the bingo book, and he was only a kid then. Well, he just basically told me a bunch of S-class nuke neens are after you and your Jinchuriki brothers and sisters, he said, frowning after giving the information. Naruto thought for a little bit before smirking at the adults in the room. I say bring them on. I've been looking for someone strong to fully test my skills on, he said, shocking the older ninjas. What are you talking about, brat? These shinobi are dangerous criminals that might have ways of disabling your demon inside of you, Jiraiya said. Well, it's a good thing that I don't use it a lot. Of course I know how to use my demon. I just never met anybody that needs to be overkilled, he said, casually scratching the back of his ear. Jiraiya's mouth was gaped open in shock until he closed it, chuckled and looked back at the Hokage. You know what, sensei? I'm starting to like this brat, he said, rubbing Naruto's head, who squirmed under the man's hand. Sarutobi only chuckled. That's Naruto-kun for you. He never backs down from a fight with someone that wants to fight him. Now that I think about it, weren't you sparring with somebody a few minutes ago? He asked Naruto, who thought for a while until his face went pale with fear. Oh shit, I'm so dead, he said, panicking. What happened? Jiraiya said in confusion. Only Sarutobi was showing a small smirk. I left Yugugo handcuffed to a tree, he said, about to body flicker out the office, when Jiraiya started giggling. Handcuffed, you say? He said, and took out a little booklet and started scribbling in it. This made Naruto groan. I forgot. My father did mention being trained by a pervert, he said, body flickering out of the office. Chapter 11, Mission Time. 2 hours later. Naruto sat in a dango shop with Kurenai, Anko, Hana, and Yugugo. The other 3 women sat together giggling. Come on, Yu-chan. I said I was sorry. Come on, forgive me, Naruto pleaded to the purple-haired Anbu lieutenant. The lieutenant sat there unaffected by the Jounin's pleading, until he got up and started rubbing her shoulders, feeling her knots and causing the woman to moan a little under the massage. You know, I read something in one of my medical books. While giving someone a massage, by using chakra, the knots unloosen faster and the pleasure skyrockets off the charts, Naruto explained, but the explanation wasn't heard by Yugugo, only the other 3 women. After a couple of minutes of massaging, Naruto started talking. So am I off the hook? He asked, watching her nod her head, causing Naruto to smirk. See, I told you massaging her would get you off the hook, Kyubi said from Naruto's head. The blonde scoffed silently and stopped the massaging when he felt a hand on his shoulder. He turned to see the waitress, who was blushing a little. Sorry to disturb you, Namike-sama, but I came to give you your bill, she said, handing him the bill and causing him to stop massaging. He took the bill and looked it over. After a while he shrugged, not caring that he had to pay for their lunch. He was just glad that he didn't have to take them all shopping anymore, which the other girls weren't happy about. He was about to speak when he heard a voice. Naruto-sensei. Naruto turned around to see his blue-haired student, AI. Hey AI, what are you doing here? I thought you loved fish more than dango, he asked, seeing her nod her head. Yeah, I do like fish more, but I wanted to try dango, and decided to come here, and I saw you here, so I might as well join you. So are you going to introduce me or what? She said, walking up to his table, looking at each of the women. Naruto's eyes frantically over the ladies. Okay. Worst thing that could happen? Anko corrupts her. The others aren't as bad as she is. He thought, calming down. Okay. The one with the brown hair is Hana-chan. She's a Chunin veterinarian. The raven-haired beauty is Kurenai-chan. She's a Jounin sensei and teaches team, he said, trailing off as he began to think to the other day. Team 8. I teach Team 8 Naruto-kun. Kurenai said, giving Naruto a mini glare, knowing that he already knew which team she taught. Naruto smiled at the glare. Yeah, Team 8, you know, the rookies, he said, not paying attention to her increase in KI. Now the purple-haired beauty, whose shoulders I'm massaging, is Yugugo-chan. She's a special kunoichi, he said, hoping she didn't figure out that she was in ANBU, and knowing AI, she will. Moving on, the other purple-haired beauty is Anko-chan. She's a special Jounin and works in the interrogation and torture division. There you met my friends. Now I'm telling you, as soon as you try dango, you'll never want to leave it. he said, causing Anko to smile knowing it was true. Naruto looked around for a chair and grabbed one before someone could sit in it, causing the guy to fall. Hey, that was my chair, the man said, quickly getting up. The blonde watched AI sit down before looking at the man. What, you weren't sitting in it? And plus, don't you think you should cut back on the dango? You're a little fat, Naruto said to the overly fat man in front of him, causing the girls to snicker, except for Yugugo, who was a little upset that Naruto stopped massaging her shoulders. The man went red in anger and embarrassment and stormed out of the shop. The blonde turned back to the table. Now AI, try this dango, he said, getting back to massaging Yuchan's shoulders and nodding to one of the dango that Anko didn't even eat since she was full off of dango and sake. The blue-haired genin picked up a dango stick and ate one of the 3 dumplings and nearly squealed at the taste. She stopped herself and looked at the anticipated faces of the women and Naruto. It's a little sweet, but I think I'll stick with fish, since it's in my name, she said calmly, taking another bite of the sweet dumpling, inwardly giggling at the face faults that went off around her. Naruto stood up, his face a little pale. I can't believe I'm teaching someone that doesn't outrightly like dango. It's unheard of, he said, mumbling to himself. For that I'm raising your training. In 1 hour I want you in our training field. I can't believe I gave you that painting, he said, mumbling again, causing AI to turn pale, thinking about her training regime going up. Wait, sensei, you can't be serious. I was just playing. This dango tastes delicious. I just wanted to see your reaction if I said I didn't like it, she said frantically. Naruto shook his head. I know, AI-chan. Now that I think about it, I need to up all of your training. You can never be too prepared, he said as an Anbu appeared behind the group. Namikaze-senpai, Hokage-sama needs you and your team for a moment. Shark, the Anbu, said before he body flickered out of the shop, his mission complete. The blonde stopped massaging Yugugo's shoulders, promising to put more time into the next session, and nodded to his student, who nodded back and got up to go get her teammates. Naruto kissed the forehead of each of the girls and vanished in a small tornado. After he left, Hana gave Yugugo a small glare. What was that, Yuchan? I thought you said you were going to make him take us shopping for the rest of the day, she said, pouting at her missed shopping opportunity. Yeah, I was really hoping to get some new equipment and some new mesh bodysuits, the pupil-less brown-eyed Tokubetsu Jounin said, pouting at not having the chance to get any free stuff. I too was hoping to get some more equipment, not to mention I need some more food in my apartment, the red-eyed beauty said, giving Yugugo a small glare, not really caring about not shopping for equipment but really wanted some groceries. The violet-haired NBU member backed up a little in shock at what just happened. She had been so engrossed in the massage that she wasn't paying attention to anything. She looked at each of them, seeing their mini glares. Well, would you look at the time? It's time for me to go, she said, quickly vanishing from her seat. Anko's face was frozen in shock. Wait, who's going to buy me stuff now? She asked herself, getting up from the now empty table, their food already paid for, and left the shop, not knowing what to do for the rest of the day. With Naruto. Naruto appeared in the office of the Hokage. Hey Gigi, what do you need now? I was just here a couple of hours ago, he said, noticing the Fire Lord's wife was in the room. His face went pale at the sight of her. His students entered the room, and when they seen the lady, their faces went pale also. Calm down, Naruto-kun. I just want you to escort her back to the capital. Her work here is done, he said, chuckling a little. The blonde and his team calmed down, thankful that they don't have to search for that stupid cat anymore. Good, because if I had to look for that cat again, I was going to go AWOL, he said, running his hand through his hair. The lady chuckled. Well, you don't have to worry about catching little Tora here. She's safe in her box, she said, looking in the box, but when she didn't see her cat, she started to panic. Oh no, Tora. Here, girl, where you go? She said, looking around the room for her cat, not seeing it anywhere. Well, new mission, Naruto-kun, go on and find that cat, Sarutobi said. Oh hell no. They could find it, Naruto said, pointing to the entering Team 7 before he body flickered out of the office, taking his students with him. Team 7 just stood there, not understanding what just happened. Well, since Naruto-kun, Left it's up to Team 7 to find your cat, Madam Sure Jimmy. He said, smirking when the genins of Team 7 showed enthusiasm at getting their first mission. Kakashi just shrugged his shoulders, but on the inside he promised to get Naruto back for this. He did not want to have them do this mission yet. With Naruto and his team appeared in the building where you get missions without the Hokage there. He walked up to the B-ranked mission scrolls and picked a random one and read through it. After a while, he nodded to the Chunin there and walked back to his team, pocketing his scroll on the way. So what mission do we have? The silver-haired Hyuga said, walking behind her sensei. It's just another escort mission. It said the person we're going to be escorting is a merchant on his way to IWA, so we're going to go to Earth Country's border and give the guy to another genin team, this time from IWA. So easy mission, all we need to do is pack for a 3-day trip and meet the merchant at the given time and date, which happens to be in 2 hours, so go home and meet me at the North Gate in 2 hours. Naruto explained, knowing they already knew how escort missions go when escorting somebody to hostile country, since they did a couple in the past year. Naruto sighed after seeing his team leave. He looked at the sky and shrugged his shoulders. I might as well find this guy. He thought, taking out the scroll to look at his picture. It showed a man in his early 30s. He had short and spiky gray hair, not old guy gray hair, just regular gray hair, and a little cutting scar under his left eye. The blonde pocketed the scroll and started walking to the North Gate. He nodded to the people who nodded at him and waved at the people who waved. He seen Asuma and his students in front of him and decided to say hi. Hey Asuma-Nizan, Naruto said. The smoker's eye twitched as he looked over to Naruto. What did I say about calling me Nizan? Asuma said, puffing some smoke above Naruto's head. Naruto gave him a big grin. You said to never call you Nizan, which is why I'm going to keep doing it, he said, smirking a little. So this is your team? Naruto said, glancing at the genins. The chain smoker nodded. Yep, the girl is Yamanaka Ino, the lazy boy here is Nara Shikamaru, and this is Akimichi Choji, he said, not wanting to say what was in his head. The genins waved to him, with Ino winking, noticing how handsome he looked in his current attire, into everything sunk in. Wait a minute, you're a jounin, but you're around our age. Did you even go to the academy? The blonde-haired girl nearly screamed, noticing his jounin flak jacket. Wait a minute, what's that? She said, looking at the tattoo on his shoulder. Naruto didn't have time to say what it was before the girl grabbed his arm and started inspecting his tattoo. She traced the tattoo's design and scratched her head in confusion with her free hand. Naruto substituted himself with Shikamaru and started scratching his neck. That's my Anbu tattoo. You remember, Asuma, I was in the corp a couple years before you went to be the daimyo's bodyguard, Naruto said, pointing to the man's sash. The genin were surprised. Even Shikamaru, who thought everything was a drag. I have no idea how someone your age could become an Anbu, what a drag. The pineapple-headed boy said, sighing, with the others nodding their heads. The male blonde scratched the back of his head. I'm just awesome like that, Naruto said, doing a big foxy grin that showed his large canines. Sometimes Asuma would oversee my training and he just loved going overboard whenever I called him Nizan, he said, patting the man on his back. And now all that training paid off. Now I can whoop his ass if he even thinks about doing that stuff again, the blonde said, grinning, activating his fully matured Sharingan for a brief second. Asuma chuckled. I'm thinking about it right now, he said, inhaling some smoke, but before he could blow it out in Naruto's face, Tora, our lovable feline, came out of nowhere and jumped on his head and jumped off, causing him to accidentally swallow the smoke and start coughing. Team 7 ran by after the cat, each one shooting Naruto a glare. Knowing that it was his fault they had to chase the stupid cat. Naruto only grinned at them. Kakashi casually walked by, looking at the coughing Asuma. He swallowed some smoke? The white-haired jounin said. Yep, I told him to stop inhaling so much of it, but you know, Asuma-Nizan. So having fun with that cat, Naruto said, smirking. Oh yeah. Watching these kids run after this cat has been the most fun I had in ever, Kakashi said sarcastically. They've been at this since they found it just outside of the building licking itself, the scarecrow said, turning a page in his porn. Naruto chuckled and looked at the sky. Well, I believe it's time for me to get to my team. I'll see you later, Kakanizan. See you later, Asumanizan. It was nice to meet you three. The blonde Jounin said, vanishing in a burst of electricity. Some static remained in his spot for a couple of seconds before vanishing. Asuma stopped coughing. That kid is such a show-off, the smoker said, taking out another cigarette, while his students smacked themselves in the forehead at seeing him take out another cigarette. What? You act like it was the cigarette's fault I started coughing. You seen that damn cat jump on my head, he said, lighting the cigarette. Well, I'll be going, Kakashi said, poofing away. With Naruto. Naruto appeared, on top of the gate with the wind blowing through his hair. He looked at a nearby tree and smiled. Then an Anbu appeared beside him. Naruto-kun, long time no see, the Anbu said, sliding his mask to the top of his head. It has been a long time, Itachi-san. I thought you were off duty. Why are you in uniform? The blonde said, looking at Itachi's attire. I am off duty, but I don't feel like being off duty, so I assigned myself gate duty, he said, looking down at the sleeping Chunin. Naruto looked down as well. Well, it's a good thing you decided to do this, or we might have been invaded with these clowns watching the gate, Naruto said, laughing, noticing a merchant fitting his described picture walking towards the gate with a wagon full of various items. Well, there goes my client. My team should be here in a couple minutes. I did teach them to be earlier than the given time, he said, remembering how Kakashi is with everything that doesn't need his immediate attention. After a couple of minutes of talking with Itachi about his mother and the kids at home, Ai, Hinode, and Heiichi showed up meeting with the client. Hey, do you know where Sensei is at? He should be here by now, the emerald-eyed boy asked, scratching his earlobe. Hinode pointed up at the top of the gate where Naruto was still conversing with Itachi. Even though he's naturally suppressing his chakra, he isn't doing anything else to hide his presence, she said, waving at her sensei, who waved back. Well, can you bring him down? I would like to meet the man that's leading this mission, the gray-haired man said, fixing the shoulder straps of his backpack. Ai nodded. Hey sensei, the man wants to meet you, she yelled, noticing Naruto nod his head, and Itachi leave with a normal body flicker. Naruto dropped off the gate and landing softly on the ground. Hello, I'm Namikaze Uzumaki Uchiha Naruto. I'm going to be leading this mission. I know I'm young, but trust me, I'm stronger than I look, he said, looking at Ai when she said much stronger. The blonde's words stopped the man from complaining about his age, and for some reason he could feel the power the blonde had. He didn't know how, he just could. Good. My name is Rasen Jean, the best merchant in the world, he said, going into a pose while laughing, making the shinobi around him sweat drop. Okay. Well, let's get this thing going, Naruto said as the man nodded, and they begin walking out of the village with Jean pulling his wagon. 2 days later. The group were now just a couple of miles away from the border, where they will deliver the merchant to a team from IWA. There were only 2 attacks in the past 2 days, retarded bandits trying to steal things that didn't belong to them. Well, they won't be trying to steal anything anymore. Because they're dead. We only have a couple of miles left, Hinode, our perimeter, he said as she activated her Byakugan. Seeing everything was clear, she nodded to him. Heiichi, you all right with that Genjutsu around us? The blonde said, glancing at the concentrating teen. Well, he's busy. Ai, how about your patrolling tigers? He said, looking at the blueonette. She looked at him. Let me check, she says before giving a short and loud whistle, nearly breaking Heiichi out of his concentration. 2 tigers jumped out of his surrounding foliage. Yes, Ai-sama. One of the tigers said. These tigers were similar to every other tiger, except they were different colors. The speaking tiger was red and the other was orange. How's the perimeter doing, Akatora? She said, petting the tiger. Everything's in order. I believe our work here is done, the tiger said, nodding to the other tiger, and they disappeared when Ai herself dismissed them. Ever since she gained those tigers, she had been more grateful. Of course, her mother was proud that she acquired a summon contract. Her mother was a little jealous that she found one when she couldn't, maybe because she never tried to look for one. Naruto nodded as they approached the bordered gates, where they could see a team from IWA there waiting for them. Naruto looked closer. He noticed the genin were showing fear at seeing him, including the jounin, but the jounin looked ready to fight. As he got closer, he could see that it was Machio Gyokuseki, Boulder. His name alone signified his origin. He was a tall, muscled man with brown hair wearing his village's personal red flak jacket proudly. As they walked up to the group, a light bulb flashed in Naruto's mind. "Oh, no wonder you looked so familiar. You look just like your brother," Naruto said, trying so hard to hide his smirk. But it was hard with the Kyuubi's laughter in his mind. One of the many veins in the man's forehead grew as his anger grew to epic levels. Ki was filling the air, and the man's chakra was visible as he grew more angrier and angrier while looking at the teen that killed his big brother. "You bastard! How dare you even mention my brother?" he said through gritted teeth. Now, y'all shouldn't fight. After all, you still have missions to complete," Jin said, becoming the peacemaker in the area. Gyo's genin were becoming more and more terrified of their sensei's Ki, while Naruto's genin were relaxing behind the protective Ki of Naruto. "Jin is right, I wouldn't want to have to walk all the way to IWA to complete the mission because you went and got yourself killed," Naruto said, activating his Sharingan for an added measure. And looking at their pale faces made him smirk even more. Jin walked across the border and began walking toward IWA, hoping that Gyokuseki would follow him, since his genin were already by his side, not wasting any time in leaving. After a while, Gyo stopped releasing Ki and body flickered away in a spiral of rocks. Naruto smirked at the exit. "Well, time to go home," he said, turning around and started walking back to Konoha. "Sensei, is it true you killed the man's brother?" Ai asked while her stomach started grumbling, making her blush in embarrassment. Naruto nodded. "Yeah, the man tried to cash in on my bounty while I was on a mission and before I took you as my students. He was pretty cocky in his skill in dust manipulation. He was nowhere near the level of his father, the Tsuchikage. Oh, and the Tsuchikage was pissed that I killed eldest son, and the man's niece was even more pissed. I just loved pissing people off," he said, sensing chakra not too far away, and from the looks of it, so did his team. The chakra wasn't hostile yet, but it felt dead for some reason, not to mention one of them had very large reserves. "Okay, I could tell that they don't know our exact location, or they do and they're just messing with us. So I want each of you to run to Konoha as fast as you can. Take soldier and food pills on the way. I don't want you to stop until you get there. Understand?" Naruto commanded, showing his serious side for a second, as they nodded and did as they were told. Naruto continued walking until he entered a clearing. He stood in the middle looking around, glad at the large size of it. "You ready, Kit? I can already tell you this isn't Sasori or Kisame, so don't you dare die by these fools," the Kyuubi roared in his mind. Naruto nodded before he heard voices. "I told you the asshole would stay and fight us. Kakuzu, you owe me 20,000 yen. A rather rude man said as two figures entered the clearing, wearing matching black cloaks with red clouds. Naruto looked over the figures, knowing that they were dangerous. He noticed the pendant the shorter figure was wearing around his neck and became shocked. He remembers reading his mother's journal. Long ago she fought somebody that wore the exact same pendant, and it took forever even for her to kill him. Not even chopping the guy's head off didn't kill him. She had to set the man on fire before she walked away victorious. Naruto racked his brain for what those kind of people are. "You, the loud one, you're a Jashinist, aren't you?" he said, backing up a little and getting into a ready stance with his hand on his sword. Laughter came out of the man's mouth. "I love this kid, he knows what I am. It's too bad I'm going to have to sacrifice you to Jashin-sama," he said, grabbing the giant scythe off his back. "It's only right for you to know the name of the one that kills you. My name is Haiden. I already know you. Namikaze Uzumaki Uchiha Naruto, container of the Kyuubi no Yoko, and sure no Kage of Konoha. It was pretty stupid of your Hokage to put you in the bingo book with so much information about yourself," Haiden said, laughing. Naruto smacked his forehead. "I knew that was a stupid decision. If I ever get out of this alive, I'm going to slap Gigi upside his head," he mumbled before growling at the two Akatsuki members. "Well, you should know that information is old and I'm much stronger than I was 5 years ago, so prepare to be surprised, members of Akatsuki," he said, taking out his sword, and vanished from his spot and tried to stab the Jashinist in his head, but his strike was blocked by one of the blades in the man's triple-bladed scythe. Kakuzu backed out of the fighting area. Take this fight seriously, Hayden. I wouldn't want you to be killed by this kid, he said. Hayden swung his scythe wildly, keeping Naruto at a distance. Me? Die? Ha! I laugh at the idea of my death. It's so funny, I think I'll laugh again. Ha ha! He said, laughing his ass off. Naruto grew a little angry that they weren't taking him seriously. He jumped back, making Hayden stop his swinging. You must calm down, Naruto. From what I know about people that worship Jashin, they are considered immortal, thanks to the gifts their crazed god gives them. And they mercilessly kill people in the name of their god, who continues to grant them immortality as long as they keep killing. They truly are dangerous people, especially if they get a taste of your blood. So don't get hit at all. The Kyuubi roared loudly. Naruto looked at Hayden. That must be why the Akatsuki recruited him in the first place, because he's immortal. Well, they certainly know how to pick him, he said, thinking out loud. But what about that one? He's still a mystery, and that's the problem. How do I fight him? He said, looking at Kakuzu, wondering just who he was. This is getting boring. Entertain me or I'll kill you faster, Hayden said, spinning his scythe using the attached cord. Naruto smirked. Oh, I'll entertain you all right into the grave, he said, activating his Sharingan. Did that even make sense? Kyuubi said in his mind. Shut up, it doesn't have to, Naruto thought. Chakra exploded from Naruto's body as he concentrated on it, making sure he didn't waste any. After a short period of time, fog began to surround the clearing, blocking the vision of the members of Akatsuki. During this time, Naruto quickly did some hand seals and stomped his foot. Doton, Heichii Karetsu, Fierce Fisher, he said quietly as a very large crack broke away in front of him, going towards Hayden, who couldn't see anything. Naruto heard a yell and stopped the technique and willed the fog to disappear to see what happened. He was shocked at what he saw. Hayden was being carried by what looked like black ramen noodles. But he knew they weren't, they were tendrils, of course. Pretty impressive technique and combination you used there. If hadn't felt the extra pulse of chakra while being surrounded by all of this chakra-condensed fog, Hayden here would being buried in a grave, like you said earlier, Kakuzu said, letting Hayden down, who had yelled upon being grabbed by the man's tendrils and haven't stopped since. Naruto grew a little worried. The Sandaime did tell me a story about the Shodai fighting somebody that resembles your appearance. It's weird seeing you alive and well, Naruto said, resting his blade on his shoulder. You should be dead, man, you're old, Naruto said, hoping to get some emotion out of the man, checking what he could use against him, but the man just nodded his head. You are correct, that was me that fought against your Shodai, and I would have killed him too if it hadn't been for his meddling Anbu and his Mokutan ability. And plus, don't you just love Kenjutsus, especially the one I took from my village, the Jiangu, that's what it's called in case you're wondering, Kakuzu said, keeping his pupil-less green eyes on Naruto, while blocking out Hayden's continuous cursing. After a while, Kakuzu started talking again. You're probably wondering why I'm telling you all of this? Well, the answer's simple, you're coming with us dead or alive no matter what, so it really doesn't matter what you know, the man said, punching at Naruto, extending his arm, which was connected to tendrils that were connected to his body. Naruto jumped to the left and threw some kunai at the man, and watched as they bounced off, useless against the man's hardened skin. HN, Naruto murmured as static started dancing around his hands and feet. If regular means can't pierce your skin, let's see how my Shogeki Takina Kabushi, shocking fist, Naruto said, rocketing forward, zigzagging before appeared behind the Akatsuki member and punched him in the back. He heard something break before Kakuzu's body flew across the clearing. The blonde didn't have any time to celebrate his attack, because a scythe flew towards his head. He jerked his head back, watching the scythe pass by in front of him, his reflection in the blade of the scythe.